Welcome to episode 25, season 3, where we cover life, geometry of charge, geometric optimal flow states, life force energy, life as a filament, life, the beginning of life, the end of life, when does life begin, Hopfian fields, quaternion braiding and the plasma filaments into the actual bodies of form, Moray B and much more. The Geometric View is a Love is Watching product. Thank you for being here and doing that. I'm your host, Buddy James. Strap in. Here we go. Please support us on our Patreon link below. Thank you. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Geometric View, season 3, where things get weird. And let me tell you, we are going to get into it. Thank you, Brighton, for this this wonderful beginning here. I think Brighton's becoming a crafter or a Mad Hatter of such. I love the new look, and
appropriately eccentric.
We have wonderful stuff in store for today. Let me make sure my mic's here on the right. Oh, yep, that's where it was. Okay. Welcome to season 3. This is episode 25 of the Geometric View. We have Michael McDuffie, Abyssal Dionysus, Dyson Yokoyama, Danny Kleinheinz, and it looks like there's possibly some other people. The call's still going out. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here on this beautiful Saturday to spend time with us as we are the group. It's my favorite thing of the entire week. I really look forward to spending time with everyone here. I'm gonna share my screen so I can see Brighton and show Brighton on full screen.
Ooh, that's fancy.
So we'll talk about what's going on with Brighton and this new aesthetic appeal that we're going to be going for this next season, and probably who knows how long. I'm freaking super excited. Like I said, thank you for being here, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 25. I'm Buddy James, your host, and today we are going to be talking about life, the beginning of life, the end of life, controlled cavitation, life as a filament, Hopfian fields, quaternity braiding of plasma filaments into actual bodies of form, the geometric universe, spires, nanospires, transmutation, how charge uses geometry to propel effulgence, charge is geometric, optimal flow states, life force energy, efficient energy charge distribution, and a whole shit ton more. This is the episode about controlled cavitation and life. The two go together, and I'm so excited to show and share with you what I have just learned within the past like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe hour. I keep finding more and more information. It's so exciting to share with everyone. So as usual, this episode, we're going to do like an hour sort of presentation with some images that I usually do. I make some maps and some images, and how that relates to the universe in an interdisciplinary approach, biologically, astrophysically, on a quantum scale, micro, macro. We get into the physics of it. We get into the nitty gritty, and also how it has to relate to how the fields are creating forms, and we are the forms living in it. So let me go to, we will start in the Skype conversation box. How's everyone doing today?
That's a loaded question.
It's beautiful out here in space. Gorgeous. All these stars, the nebula. Yeah. Fighting away the force.
All right. Well, yeah, this is perfect, Brighton, because we are going to talk about the force. We're going to get into life force energies and Doctor Strange, of all things. We're going to get into optimal flow states. I'm super excited. But here's the first image that kind of got the week started. This is an image that I put together based on controlled cavitation. And what happens to a bubble when it cavitates, and how it enfolds on itself with a reentry jet as it warps and morphs in the morphology of the bubble, and then it turns into a spire, a microspire, and the reentry jet is what turns into a spire and a microspire. Let me pull up this image. You know what? I'm going to do it right here. These are the gentlemen that got me into understanding about this more. And mostly it was Jason Verbelli, the Real Verbs, who's really pushing me. Well, who's really, I'm moving towards that direction because I see a lot of truth that he has to share. So thank you to Jason Verbelli, Real Verbs, shout out. This is the shape right here of a cavitating bubble. Let's talk about what cavitation is and a cavitating bubble. The best way to do that is, I guess, imagine this as a bubble at the top of the surface of a liquid, and then a laser is shined at it to heat it up, or sound is propagated into it, and it creates this toroidal shape and a reentry jet. And that reentrant jet formation is really important, and we'll get back to that and talk about that throughout the beginning of this presentation, because I like to draw an image. Well, actually, what really has been happening is I'm just constantly understanding more and more, so I like to share it with everyone. So I have a couple of images here. This is a new image as well. I have 3 maps today because I have so many of them, whatever. But I'm sure this might be a whole episode in and of itself. This is a spire, and this is cavitation. These are what we've been studying since the beginning of this episode. There is a braiding of these spheres as they nest off of the center. And this is what I propose is what's creating the self-organization of these. There's a natural self-organization here, which is what pervades space. Space is not empty; it's filled with information, and information in a super fluid type of state, where it's based on the pressure and rarefaction of the system that creates all of the ambient details that come off of the central node as we cascade off of the filamentary networks and build off of the networks themselves. So excited to share with you a couple of new discoveries. So what's really important about cavitation here is, well, one of the things that's really important is when this bubble comes down. Where's another image? There was some other images. Let me look in. I looked up. Let me copy. Okay, and there's also videos where I have, but this is cavitation. Nanospires business and technology focus on the harnessing of high-speed liquid cavitation reentrant microjets. Nanospires technology is based on cavitation, a boiling phenomenon that involves a change of phase from the liquid to the gaseous state of a particular substance. Okay, so here's the bubble. They heat the bubble up. It collapses really tight, then it expands all of a sudden, creates this this hyperboloid type of pattern here. Maybe I can get a closer image of it so everyone can see better. There we go. There seems to be 3 images here too. See what they got. Okay. See, this is, what's that shape? That goes like this, a cardioid. Okay, it creates a cardioid shape.
Looks
And
like
then,
the same shape as a blastophore.
Yep, and the brain that we were looking into, yep, the beginning of that pinch there, and which is the beginning of life, blastiophore. So this is the episode of life. So we're going to talk about life, how this has to do with life, these guys' idea of a theory of cavitation of life, cavitation theory of life. So anyway, so this is the reentrant jet. It comes out, it becomes a microspire, and it becomes really, really tiny. And we've been talking about this all throughout the episode, all throughout different episodes. I contacted Jim Wenninger, the astrophysicist that is showing and help demonstrating that this is happening on the macro scale, and indeed it is. Now, okay, so let's talk about nanospire before we start getting into more of the other shapes and what the cavitation is and the implications of this, because I want to keep my mind focused, because I want everybody to understand this before we move on to the next one. And this is all up in the Doherty set geometry, these nanospires and these spires. As you've seen in the back of the image of me at the beginning of the episode here, I have some stained glass behind me that is the shape of this, and this is what we've been covering for quite some time, and here it is. But they're nested spires within spires within spires, and this is inside of this is an efficient way to distribute charge in a helical manner. And these spires become 1 nanometer thick, or 1 micron thick, like the same size as DNA, and it becomes really tiny, like pine cones do it too. Biology and nature, everything is cavitating, and it's cavitating so as to get the most amount of distribution of its seed and maximize its surface energy, its surface. So that's the cube square law again. The surface, maximizing surface, minimizing volume. And it automatically creates this efficient energy distribution for the life to catch the sun and use the sun as energy to become living life forms. So this is important in biology and in physics, because they're finding that transmutation is actually occurring when these spires hit, for say a medium or your substrate. If you were to have a substrate of just a steel disc, and this 1 micron thick nanospire comes in, it hits the plate, and I'm telling you basically what they did, their research, Mark Leclerc's research. The nanospire hit the plate, and out of thin air, because it's just air and water, it creates these cavitation jets and transmutes the steel into all sorts of heavy elements. rare heavy elements that we used to only think formed in the sun. They're forming these extremely rare elements and isotopes that we never thought that we could find before out here. Like, I don't know if that's it, but like, envision, here's the crazy elements that you can't make. They're making them. Okay, now here, what is cavitation? Cavitation bubbles are created when an object passes through a liquid rapidly, or when a liquid is brought into its boiling point. Okay? An object passes through a liquid rapidly. So cavitation bubbles collapse asymmetrically next to an object, causing a high-speed liquid jet to shoot towards the object. The cavitation reentrant jet exits the bubble at up to Mach 4 and can drill a hole through the diamond. And side note, they're finding that they know that based off of the cavitation dents based on the cavitation dents, the holes that is formed, they're seeing that they're helical, and it's a double helical leader, like we've been saying, and I've been saying on this show from the beginning. And also the geometry of lightning, that episode, check out that episode. I think that's episode 6 of the geometric view. Now, this is super important because these craters are all over the moon, all over the earth, blue holes. Okay, now I think I said enough about the geometry of charge. Acceleration of charge produces geometry and geometric rheometry, flow geometry, and that is what Dan Winter proposes as gravity, acceleration of charge. So charge is compression and rarefaction. That's what charge is. That's how you build charge. That's how you gain charge and energy. Laminar coherence is the spin density at the center of it. And constructive charge interference is life. These are Dan Winter's words, and that I took out and after studying a lot of his work. And efficient charge distribution is life, which is constructive charge interference. It's all about interference and how to interfere with.
Question, buddy.
Yeah.
Does this happen exclusively in water?
No.
Is this a water phenomenon exclusively?
No.
Okay. So now
this is ethereal.
More interesting.
Sorry to continue, or here, it is ethereal. It happens in many mediums.
Okay.
And so,
but is it always a transformation from one state to another? The surrounding. I'm not talking about the incident itself. I'm talking about the surrounding environment where the incidents occur, where the cavitation occurs. It can happen in space, in space, yes, without water.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's what the superfluid of space is, and that's what sono.
Right. See,
sono,
that's that goes back to what I was thinking before, which is really space is water. That we live in a liquid state, like space is liquid. And,
it's embryonic.
That we have to exactly, but there's this element of liquidity to space that I think is understood, and so the connection between what the pistol shrimp can do and the technology behind it is fascinating to me. But the idea that I was not aware, I didn't know one way or the other, that the cavitation can happen in other mediums beside water, which just opens up. I mean, my brain just cracked open too. So great job.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, see, this is really what's happening. Okay. When you get to the matter of fact, this is how you construct spiritual whirlwinds. This is how you move your plasma body to engulf the world and the whole solar system, and then galaxy by galaxy. and how you become an epiphany surfer from effulgent knowledge that comes directly from source. This information comes directly from source, out of the hallways of always. This is information, and it's only compression and rarefaction. It's only based off of what Walter Russell was talking about, with heat seeking cold and cold seeking heat. And when you start moving plasma and these energy fields around us, we can cavitate them too. And that's what snuffing out a candle is from a distance, or building up mind fields with complete bodies that can move from place to place, that people call astral projection. This stuff is dangerous, but I have to talk about it because we are equipped. We have the equipment to go all the way home, Dorothy. We are already in the imagination is more powerful than knowledge and information, because it is the story. We think up the story, we see it, we know it's there, we talk about it, we can tell it, but not unless you're inept, intuitive, Groot, and you have this knowledge that you can. This is what I'm saying. This knowledge cavitates from the sun, and it is part and parcel of this ovium, this liquid life that is around us. Space is liquid. It is sonoluminescence. It is, we are simaglyph saltwater beings, and we are singing our song, beating on drums, and the drums themselves are bessell functions. We make the beat that other people sing and move their feet to. We are the orchestrators of life. Life comes from and is a process crystal that we are. We never tell ourselves that we can't do something, because we are infinitely powerful, and that's what we are most afraid of. And it's good to be afraid, because if we were to break down all of our senses and all of our barriers, we would be afraid of everything, because we would see the truth for what it is, and it lays barren and hollow, because at the center there is nothing. It's all hollow, and this is why it's hollow, because it's cavitating. We are cavitating, and we are ephemeral, wisping off of the whims of this zephyr. We are just flapping, but just a very quick moment. So that's what life is. It's pushing. It is gravitative. It is pulling you towards the source. That's what life is. Whatever pulls you away from the source is the death vortex. Whatever pulls you towards the source is the life vortex. And look what I just found, guys. This is Beltrami vortex. Beltrami vortex. Look at this, dude. Creates macroscopic coherence and zero-point energy. Archetype of self-organizational form. This is the Bessel function. This is the Birkeland current. This is what the nanospire does. So if you've been following us from the beginning here, we're really coming to a lot of not conclusions, but a lot of pointing towards what's next. Here's the Bessel function inside of the drum of the cavitating vortex. Now, Mark Leclerc and Moray B. King let's see what this has to say. Nanospire, how it works. A simple pump is used to generate the cavitation bubbles in the process of imploding. So yeah, I forgot to say implosion enough. The whole thing's implosion. Implosion is the life force. Explosion is the death vortex. And what I mean by that, Walter Russell talks about it, and I can show you directly in the geometry too. But radiative, things that are radiating from the source is what is called entropy. Entropy is information. We can only measure what's radiating from the source. We can't measure what's coming from the source because it's before our measurement. That's why we're trying to get to 0 point so we can see what's happening. The more we get to 0 point or zero absolute cold, absolute zero, we find more particles. We find a whole particle zoo of particles, and that's because of this helicoidal type of structure, and that's coming out of the source and going into the source as charge, powering different payloads, different loads, different suns are all powered by the same sources. It is all energy, and energy coming in creates these patterns of self-organization that are nested helical recursions of fractality, fractal energy. This is what fractality is, and it's all phase conjugation. It's all golden mean. From point to point, from center point to center point to center point, that's the golden mean. From center point to from pinch to pinch to pinch, these three, that's the golden mean. That's what every one of these are braided on every single level, and they're quaternion braiding that builds life and creatures and living organized matter and unorganized matter out of chirality, because there's only two chiralities. There's only two directions. In spin, there's only two directions. There's left and a right chirality, and there's only an in and an out. There's no left or right other than chirality. So it's all implosion and explosion inside of the vortical Doherty coordinate system. The Theodortian vortical coordinate system is ultimately what Walter Russell was studying, how he became so intuitive with understanding the universe and in an interdisciplinary way that it incorporates how he was a naturalist and watched everything based off of nature. That's what I do. I am a nature fanatic. All I do, well, I can't say all I do, but I was raised on nature shows. Nature shows, nature will teach you everything you need to understand. So when these plates hit, it transmutes. Like I said, here we go. In the process of imploding, a solid crystal of water is formed that is involved in the burrowing effect, 0 point energy, which can be transmuted. People don't like to hear that word, whatever. ZPE can be transmuted or replaced with the word spire. I mean, they're trying to get into this. Anyway, ZPE shows up in that process to drive it, pulling it along by its own shock wave, which has been labeled the Leclerc effect, and that in turn sets up the nuclear event. Both fusion and fission are possible, where most of the heat energy is then manifest. So let's look at some of the holes here, if they have some of the pits that were let's go to this. Let's you know what, this is a video because we're gonna hop around. We're not gonna play a lot of it because it's like 35. Yeah. I'm gonna mute and just hop around. Okay, we're at 36 minutes in or so, but you see the process here.
Could you send this in the chat?
I'm not going to put any video in, but yeah, I can copy and put it in the chat here. Paste. So that everybody can have a link. I think I sent it. Yeah, okay. So that everybody can have a link. This is a presentation by them, Nano Spire, and Cavitation reentry jet technology platform applications across multiple markets, materials, coating, sensors, fabrication, biotechnology. So this is like what you could use it for, the market, nanomaterials, semiconductors, cosmetics, biotech. I'm more interested in like the geometry and see the hexagonal charge, rotation of charge, just like we were showing in our episode 6, the geometry of lightning. This is it. Whoop, whoop. And then that moving and spiraling down as charge, acceleration of charge producing gravity, implosion. This is a graph here. Let's see what we can gain off of this. Can't really see it too well. Okay, so I went to this one, which I love, Moray B. This is how can the 0-point energy become an energy source, which, you know, everyone really wants to get in to try to figure that out. But I love Moray B. He reminds me of the geology professor we're about to do, the Electric America with, which is a whole huge endeavor that we're doing with electric formation of Michigan and electric formation of the United States and all of America. And then we're going to take it globally. So hyperspace and flux. Let's see some of these images here. I was interested in this. Helical flow and plasmoid, vortex ring filament. We've been talking about this. This is the Aurora Borealis, the snake eating its tail, and the geometry. I showed that. We've been getting ball lightning as a plasmoid, electron spiral tail, wrapping up inside of itself. That's awesome. So it's toroidal, helical, as we know, as we've been showing and learning more about. So here's the borehole when it comes back into itself, the water vortex.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. So we're talking about nanospires and life and the cavitation bubbles, a lot of stuff. I can't really get you too much up to speed. We're just getting into some of the geometry more. And this is what I really want to show here. Oh, here's the braiding of the seed of water cluster gas. Oh wait, there's a chain element here that I wanted to show off. But this, boom, Beltrami vortex, key to understanding vacuum energy. There's the math for it. Here's the imploding force-free vortex filament. This is 1996. This is before Donald Scott. This is old information. This is so who knows how long this has been around, but we've shown that this is in ancient structures like the Great Pyramid. But this is all the same doubling of the inverse square law, inverse cube law. in the queen's or king's chamber, you have chambers that are also nested just like this, indicative that it was built in order to maintain some capacitance and some charge, or build something up through there. Which, when Neil Thompson talks about the ionosphere getting more energy.
I can actually expand on a little bit of why there. So one thing that a few people talk about when they talk about coaxial cable or coaxial currents is it's not just about capacitance, it's about efficiency.
Yes,
so
efficient charge distribution.
When it stores we could just call it information. We don't have to say charge. We can just
Yep.
say any system, any vortex system like that. It's storing it so that the system is able to maintain itself for a longer period of time. And Don Scott does cover this with his Bessel function degrading by 1 over the square root of r. And the reason why it's degrading at that rate instead of 1 over r squared is that it's storing the information for a longer period of time because of course space is extremely vast.
And it's filled with this viscous, like, liquid filaments that are secreting in our Van Allen belts and raining down as the auroras, supersonic, ultrasonic, microsonic jets are coming in constantly in the ears of dogs and causing them to howl and move around packs of reindeer. So fungus can, so psychotropic funguses can move into different animals, and the Earth can have an experience, a reindeer experience. How does the sun experience being a reindeer? Through entheogens, through psychotropics. How does the whole system experience itself as a human? How, if the Earth wanted to be a human, well, how would it create, if the Earth wanted to feel itself and wanted this human to feel the universe as whole, it would create a way to do it. And we have endogenous DMT and different psychotropic things inside of our brain that allow us to pick up on these universal currents that when we get deeper into them, we can see beings, and then beings within beings, and then it just goes on and on and on. And we are part and parcel of this, and we are not disconnected from it. We are very connected from it, and we are in tune. We're not out of tune. I can't stand so much mis and disinformation out there, making everybody feel like shit based off of the placebo effect. Everything's good.
Well, I have to tell you that Ayurveda and Chinese medicine are pretty square about the fact that most people are not in tune. It's just a state of normalcy.
I agree, but this is because we don't have control of our minds.
Well, there's that. There's also an inner aspect. So it takes a certain amount of internal signal for you to generate the connection, and then you have to maintain it. There's a conscious awareness, and that conscious awareness is difficult to maintain in a distractive world, and it's also difficult to maintain when you're being chased by a lion. But you see, if you were in it, then you, like Daniel, you wouldn't encounter the lion in the same way. There's a guy who wanders around Africa, hanging out with hyenas and lions and everything, and they just accept him because he's in a constant state of connection with them. So, but most people are not in that state, and they're experiencing instead a dissonant state, and that's of course increases the fear. Nature has a function for that, though, because if everything was connected to the positive, then how could things that thrive in the negative grow? And they are necessary. I mean,
right, absolutely.
Which is, parasites, all those things. They are yin species, and we don't like them very much as a whole because we're not a yin species. But luckily, we have basically 50-50 disposition. But on the whole, we're more a yang species. There are individuals who are more yin, but on the whole, most people are yang and prefer the daytime and prefer activity. And that could, maybe that changes over a long, long period of time, but I think biologically apes apes and primates are primarily yang oriented and have a natural fear of yin species, because a lot of yin species cause disease. But being dissonant with certain species, it doesn't mean that a person has to be dissonant with the entire system. You know, you could observe the parasite or the venomous spider, and you can still be resonant with the entire system. And so that's basically how Native Americans exist. Of course, they just call it the medicine. And so if you are with the medicine, then you're with the creator. And if you're with the creator, or the great spirit, sometimes they would say, then when you walk around, you don't have to have much fear. And so that it enabled them to be incredibly brave. Even in the Welsh myths, when the Arthurians visited, when the Cymry came with Arthur, they remarked on how brave and fighters that they were. I mean, essentially the stone walls wouldn't work because they would just go right over top of them, because they existed in this state of connection to the entire forest. So when they would, you know, manage the land here in Kentucky or in Wyoming, at Yellowstone, I mean, they were using slash and burn and controlling populations, but it was all for a greater harmony. It was all for a greater whole. But they were at an incredible war with each other. But they still mutually agreed what that harmony should ideally be, which is really fascinating. There was.
Buddy, I have a question for you. Have you guys ever considered, or have you yet considered, the idea of a cavitation engine? I fascinate myself with practical applications of some of these amazing discoveries that we're making, and I wonder if there's a possibility that an interstellar travel might be possible via harnessing the power of cavitation, and maybe we could use cavitation to power our ships, and possibly we could develop something along the lines of spiral cartography, because I think travel through space really is going to be based on the understanding that that forward motion exists only in the context of a spiral, and that there is no straight lines. And I think we kind of already know that, which is why we slingshot around the moon to get places, you know. But the idea that we can develop this new these ideas have practical applications beyond even our wildest imaginations, and I wonder if you've considered the technological applications at all.
Indeed, that's a great question. To answer your question, this is the Alcubierre warp drive, and I have found many. You can actually look at the geometry and see that you can find that in many different spots inside the Doherty set and the Doherty network. I've actually put together exactly where it is and how you can create. That's where every wave is cavitating. That's what's happening. We are in cavitation right now. We are in warp drive. We are cavitating through the universe, and every single wave, there's void at the beginning, and there's a lens of voidance at the beginning and a lens of voidance at the end, and we are cavitating. So it's a localized universal experience. So that's why we feel like we're universal creatures, but it's a localized universal experience. But we are universal creatures because we are equipped with the hardware that allows us to go from galaxy to galaxy already. And that's what I'm talking about: electric universe, mind and consciousness, getting tuned in.
That warp drive is based on space-time, though.
Well, no, you can use this literally. It doesn't matter if it's based on space-time or not. The fluidity of what we're talking about here, of out there in space, you could build something similar to the heliosphere or a teardrop type of shape, and most likely project through the universe, but you wouldn't even have to move through it. See, the speed of light is too slow. We do move instantaneously, so we already know this. So how do we understand that math of instantaneous communication of our gut microbiome changing when a solar flare goes off instantaneously?
Well, information travels faster than light, but information's massless, and so
yes.
building ships What you're talking about is that we have to transfer the information.
Yes, we need to transfer into
But-
information. That's what this.
I
That's
have
what this is.
I have
Yes.
bad news too, though. The bad news is you need an antenna on the other side. So you got to physically
Already
go
built.
and set up the antenna on the other side, and that's going to take time.
It's already built. Look, this is a galactic structure here. Okay, we're talking about life, we're talking about cavitation, and we're talking about
Well, yeah, you can certainly get somewhere, but I'm saying if you want to go to some beach planet in some other place, and you're going to go visit family, there has to be an antenna set up for that over there. You can't just like, I'm going to go everywhere. You could end up in, who knows where you could end up. You could be resonating with an antenna inside the solar system in the asteroid belt, or you could be resonating with a filamental structure on the other side of the Milky Way. And you could be resonating with all of those, and you could end up in multiplicity of places.
oh, that's the word. Okay, Beltrami. Here it is. Okay, this is, look, see, okay, Beltrami structures in disk jet systems, alignment of flow. I don't know if I clicked on this, but I'm going to click on it. It might be this right here. Yeah. Okay. Excuse me. Alignment of flow and generalized vorticity. So what I'm saying is it's already built. They're called galactic jets, and it's charged. And ideas are coming out of the sun. Ideas are flowing out of the sun, and we have helical receptors inside of our DNA that picks it up. And a combination of taking earth medicine and our own intellect, which is also vastly surpassed by our creativity. What's the word I'm looking for? More powerful than knowledge. What's more powerful than knowledge?
Logos.
Logos. This is the logos. This is
Right, but the information that comes out of the sun, you can measure the time that it takes to travel. All signals are propagating through electromagnetic waves at the speed of light, or a little slower medium.
Some of them are different. Some of them are superluminal, as we were just talking about. Some of them are subluminal, and there's recursions that occur inside the Van Allen belts that we heard that the northern lights have a sound, and they're making the sound that the frogs make.
Right.
You know, these recursions exist at all scales. We can come into this network through these Beltrami vortexes. These Beltrami vortexes are what, if you were an artificial intelligent or advanced civilization, you could come in with a reaching arm and reach into a vortex system and seminate it with the ideas of the eggs of beings because ideas are seeds.
There's a good chance though you're not going to be human after that process, because when you modulate a signal, it changes the signal. I mean, it doesn't. It's not like it stays the same.
I'm talking about galactic panspermia from here, from Earth. Okay, so
yeah.
How would we do that? We would figure
probably
out.
Already happened.
What's that?
It's probably already happened. It's probably constantly happening.
Well, most likely, and that's the thing.
Where are all these souls
in that stream? If the stream is on, how do we get in? How do we tap it? And that's the I3.
Well, I'll tell you what the Book of the Dead says. It's very explicit about how these 8 billion people got here. Is that they didn't want to go into nirvana, and they observed 2 people copulating, and then they entered the womb of the mother. So where are they located in this limbo or bardo space? Where are they located? You know, how are they moving around so easily? But where are they coming from? Probably, like you're describing, there's a huge amount of memory. We have a weird feeling that we've been invaded by insects before, and we also have this pervasion of a belief that we destroyed an entire planet. And despite the cataclysms, it's still quite possible that we, as a species, have migrated here from another place.
I do believe. Well, think about this. Okay, electrosonic speciation. according to my theory here of electrosonic speciation, of origin of species here, the information is constantly streaming in through the sun, and and that's how we can have these larger than universe experiences inside of a vessel, a being, a creature, a living organism. We can have these cosmic experiences, cosmic illumination, become a cosmic illuminate. You can do it without drugs. I'm not always saying that you need the medicine or the entheogens, but it's called entheogen for a reason, ingesting God, and gets you in tune to a different degree that you might not be able to perceive things from before. So it heightens your senses. So these Akashic memories are just recursions of the beating drum that's coming up. Here's the sun. Here's the sun. Recursions of the beating drum on node points, toroidal nodal points inside of helical filaments. It's helicoidal. And the efficient charge distribution is phase conjugation. All phase conjugate systems are efficient charge distribution, which is why pine cones and pine trees look the same as this fucking image. Excuse me, I'm passionate, sorry. But you know, I mean, when you look at this Beltrami,
I'm totally here for the passion.
When you look at the Beltrami, I fucking love you, Michael. I love all of you guys intently, and there's many other groups forming because, dude, it's just starting. We are starseed children, and we're children of the earth, children of the logos, speaking universal languages. Our last episode was about universal languages. I didn't even get into it. I started to. And the how Hilbert himself came up with a universe game, and the math game. He came up with the math game. It was like an automated process for solving everything eventually. This is what I'm talking about. This is that process. We have the capacity with the automated inherent mind capacity to solve all things eventually. And that's why we are always driven so much to there's a light and a darkness. We know that we're going towards the light, but we also know that we're going towards the darkness because we're dying. And okay,
everything's dying though. Everything's dying.
Everything recordable is death. That's what entropy is. Entropy is death. That's information. Entropy equals information. Information is what we measure radiating off of this system, particularly this geometry, because it's inverse cube, inverse square lattice that the sun and energy, electricity, electromagnetism, gravity, light all move in that same pattern. So if you can come up with a geometry that moves and works using that same geometry, this is fucking it. This is it. And this is what Dan Winter talks about. That's why his images look similar. That's the Muru Foundation, talking about light being toroidal and our language coming out of a toroid and a moving central throat, the enveloping opening up of the throat of the torus. That's what I study. I study the Doherty set is what holes are, how holes open and close, and what lives inside of holes. And we are that. We are inside of that. That's cobordisms. This is mathematically. It's what it's called. It's how these knots, helical knots, become fibers and vibrations into Hopfian structures and Hopfian types of geometries, like we covered on the last episode. Speaking of the last episode, remember when it looked like a peanut and the Hopfian hop vibration was unraveling and winding? This is that pinch right here that pinched it all of a sudden. And there's a pinch. This is represented geometrically inward, of course, phase conjugate, because all systems are phi that come out of here. naturally, the way that the spheres touch and nest produce a cascading of phi. That's why phi is like the lubricant of the system. That's why phi is beauty. And if you're led by beauty, you will be looking ever so much closer for the truth, because truth, beauty, love, and life is what the logos is. And when you're looking for those things, you start to see those patterns and recursion in nature, and you can build larger structures that start to make sense on a minor scale, macro scale, and a micro scale. I have about 2 minutes left to kind of talk a little bit about cavitation, but you can see if this was the microspire, that's indeed what's happening too. And if you can envision the enveloping of the bubble coming out and shooting, and this is the outside of it. This is the outside torus coming in, the reentry jet creating naturally, because it's toroidal, that type of shape. But this is capturing it every phase. All these phases put together is the pine cone shape here, coincidentally, of course. That's why I say when you look at a pine cone, you're looking at a wavelet that is manifested in the three-dimensional form, like it just popped into existence and popped out of existence, from implosion to explosion, from the implosive force on the inside of the pine cone to the explosive force on the outside, where it hangs and dangles from the tree and gathers its nutrients. So there's a few more things here. So looking at this, Beltrami structures and disk systems, when you look into this writing and you look into the images that I just shared, you can see that same type of thing happening here. This is how Walter Russell said that systems move from place to place, from point to point, in these vortical type of like units and subunits, subvortices.
Yeah, I want to point out that structure looks like a Buddhist stupa for a reason, because in Mahayana Buddhism, you're trying to ascend the 9 heavens to the Tushita heaven.
How do you spell it?
Tushita is Tushiti.
Buddhist temple? Buddhist temple?
All sorts of just put Buddhist stupas.
Oh, stupa. Oh yeah, all of them, yeah. And this is the acceleration of charge, and this is electric universe architecture, plasma universe architecture.
Yeah, I mean, Borobudur has a lot of this stuff. But yeah, again, the insistence in Mahayana that you're able to achieve Buddhahood in the current level, and even the gods of the upper heavens and even the Tushita heaven will then have obeisance to you, and so that even in the Lotus Sutra, the various gods, Brahma, Indra, Shiva, etc., they lay out the mat and make it rain mandavra flowers and lapis lazuli, etc., because the consciousness exists in a perfect centralized state.
Okay, I thought I look at this. Is this not beautiful, gorgeous, peaceful, exotic, right, lovely, non-harming? You know, I don't see.
I think you got to read. I think you got to read the Lotus Sutra, man.
Yeah, I love this stuff, and I don't see the Illuminati, skull and bones, death cult, type of entropic, only death, seeing the dead things, materialistic, just not recognizing this. This right here is like the negentropic, life-giving vortex. You can see that nature's drawing itself. As I draw closer to the divine or the universe, the logos, I find out more about who I am as a person. That's what tells me who I am, not other people. Other people will give you an ego. Other people will tell you what they think you want to hear. But if you gain, this is why you don't lean on your own understanding, but rather higher levels of thought, your your higher Godhead. And I mean, as interdisciplinarian approach as I am with science, math, everything else, I am very much so in a religion aspect too, you know. And I'm not saying that Lucifer doesn't exist as an archangel, because you can see archangels are probably existing inside the Van Allen belts for eons before us. I mean, there's these charges of things out there we don't understand. That's why we call them spirits or angels. And when the ionosphere was closer towards the earth, this was a lot more prevalent. Most religions start as animism, showing that all living things are spirit, and there's a spirit and a life in them. They come from animism, and then they grow into all sorts of different religions. I'm very pro starting and affirming truths in many different religions, you know.
That's the goal of complete reality Taoism.
We should be able to build a temple, you know, to a beautiful thing that someone wants to call Apollos or Aphrodite, or, you know, I'm very much for a universal everybody, because that's what builds individual uniqueness. Without individual uniqueness, you only have one bland thing, you know. So
well, may I speak in here?
Please.
On what you're saying right now, I look at when I really started applying wisdom, I guess. Love, respect in every religion, and as I mentioned before, within 200 years of every single enlightened being that's come here, whether feminine or male, you know, masculine, has been perverted and perversed into a religion where somehow or another we can tax it, we can pimp it, we can sell it, we can control people with it. Okay, so if you look at that aspect, everything is incomplete, and I really appreciate Raymond's fortitude in the Buddha's background of things, because that's where I started looking at it. I'm like, you know, everybody, you know, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So when I looked at every single religion, everybody tries to say in their religion that every other religion is wrong. And when I looked at the fact that there's missing components in every single one of them, whether it be purposely, you know, perniciously, whether it be out of ignorance, or whether it be, you know, for the fact of loss through the archives of time, I found that they're all incomplete, every single one of them. And we will never come together with it all unless we can look at it as all incomplete, and that there's something about your religion, your belief. As Buddy said, that's why I wanted to interject here, because this is where individuality of every single, we need to keep this in mind, that every single helical DNA strand with that little junk DNA trail coming off is an antenna. Mm-hmm. Our brains, we are every single one. And the gentleman earlier, I don't know who was, talked about the fact of, you know, interstellar flights and stuff like that, you know, we're going through the stars. Absolutely right. Where are you going to go? But the thing is not what's there when you get there, because we can travel as light, and all we need to do is pick a frequency. Like right now, we're all on one frequency for one call. You know what I mean? We could all travel in this data ship, you know what I mean, so to speak, in a light wave, and miss a lot of things through GPS. But you do have to know the GPS when you get there, just like the gentleman said.
Think about it this way. We could figure out a universal code and realize that what we really need to do is self-implode the planet Earth in order to communicate with the rest of the universe. And in doing so, it would be suicide, but it would also be knowing that we could communicate with the universe. We see.
Well, if you look at your, instead of self-implode, and we look at it as self-compressing, like we all right, if the bell isn't at the right harmony, you know what I mean, you're not going to resonate. The glass won't break. You know what I'm saying? The body won't heal. So what we need to do right now, we're coming into the sea era. And this is the house of Horus. We're literally coming into the sea era, where we are going to be in the land of Egypt again, not in the desert. See, we're coming out of the desert, which is in the house of Seth.
Which is true. Can I say something along the lines of this real quick?
Go right ahead, please. This is dialogue. Yes, please do.
Okay, so So what's happening right now is the locusts are moving back to the Fertile Crescent, and there is an inundation of rain, and people are moving back there, and there's as the Earth is moving, as the North Pole is moving, and the magnetic reversal continues to happen, we can see things like this. I was watching this on Adapt 2030 or Ice Age Farmer, one of the two, but you can see that we are moving towards the times of Egypt. Continue.
Yeah, we are. And well, Yangtze is being torn apart right now. And I didn't get this before, but recently with a lot of the research that I've been doing, I keep bumping into this. See, and thank you, Cosmic Chris. I appreciate all our interlude. You know, there's stuff that so many from Raymond, everybody drops these little nuggets, and we all can't get every single ingested one. But I'm telling you, at the timing at which I needed, it shows up. So that being said, we're moving back into the Sierra. The Sierra, out of a whim, I'm like, you know, when did the Sierra used to thrive? Because I remember, you know, in history that the Sierra Desert was once a flourishing oasis. So we're coming back into that time again. And there's a river that exists, and I can't think of the name of the river at the moment, but there's a river that actually comes out, and it spawns out past the eye of the Sahara, where, you know, that big formation, as you can see from space. Now, there's a river, and all the formations are still there, and they actually found this out through sonic resonance on the Earth's surface, and found that these things actually existed through the old fauna and all that, that we are probably about ready to have the reversal. So Mississippi and the Nile will still be in conjunction. But what I'm seeing in the tear gate that's going on in Yangtze, and the Sahara might very well fire up, is that if we look at a reversal from our polarity switching and our rotation values being going from west to east, that we might very well go from east to west. So where the sun, you know, sets in the east and rises in the west, which very well could happen. And there's calendars, there's different depictions in history that talk about these different flip gates, you know, and the stall of time when Christ came here. So if we show up like that, these very well could answer the reason why we're going to have oases, as you talked about, the change of locus. Why do you think they migrate? You know, everybody thinks it's a pestilence, it's a plague, but really maybe we're in their way. You know, they know before we do that they got to go, like you said, to the new vegetation, and there's going to be a change.
There's an increase in information and vision. The children and the youth are having visions to teach the elders, and including myself. This came to me in 2019, and I've been astutely following and understanding everything about it ever since, you know, 2003. And it's been unfolding. Well, actually, there's a quaternion unfolding of it.
That's a great that's it. Transcription, the unfolding transcription, because that's what it is. It's a transcription. It's a transcribing of what? Data. So you got data transcription is how the whole entire universe is created. And something at this point that markered me for you, buddy. I'd like to twist your mind on this one. Every single one of your Doherty sets happens every time there's a color exchange. So your Doherty set, like every time red meets blue, or, you know what I'm saying, or starts to compress and make yellow. See, I mean, whenever these colors start to compress and heat and rarefact and disseminate, they have a vortice, which causes a whole entire new Doherty set to stick up. And this is what I was trying to pronounce earlier on one of the shows when I said that, you know, at every 360 degrees, it's every 360 degree of possibility. Because when you start blending in the colors, as they meet, the variance, because of 1 degree of frequency meeting another degree of frequency, creates a whole new angle. Some of them are spiked, some of them are very lateral, very open, and have very much easements. 30/60s, you know, 30-degree easement is much better than a 45. You have a resistance there. So, you know, as you talk about light waves and how we communicate and can transcribe ourselves clear to the other side of the universe, we just have to understand frequency variance and what the frequency exchanges of others, because there are going to be pulsars. Like, put it this way, if you go across the universe in a light wave, a pulsar is going to have more effect on you than the planet or a star. Does that make sense? Because you're more in tune to their frequency exchange than matter, you know? So you just have to kind of, those are the things I don't understand. When I found out that hyperspace is possible, I'll leave it with this and anybody can add in and put conjecture on it. But when I found out hyperspace was possible with the math of exponential growth through tau and phi ratios and the crosshairs of them through 2-3 ratio crossovers, that guess what? GPS is the most important thing. Why do you think that the air traffic controller controls the air? Because they can't have a pilot out there flying around in air that isn't logged in GPS, because the hardest thing coming out of hyperspace is where you at when you get there. Is there solid matter there? Is there a plane that just happened to be like Area 51? But go ahead. I leave the floor. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to bring the subject back to what Buddy was actually mentioning, that has been prophesied for a lot longer than the so-called indigo children, all that stuff. The Lotus Sutra mentioned the rising of the so-called bodhisattvas of the earth thousands of years ago.
I love it.
Ago.
Nice.
And it's not
the Hopi Indians, and this is another thing that blows my mind. See, people think that it's lizard men and all these different creatures coming around in grays and stuff. Well, the grays are literally just radio saturated beings. That's all they are. And they're coming back. They still think they can make it. But if we look at everything to a time continuum and no time continuum, that these are all the possibilities that we had, as somebody else said earlier, that this possibility is that, you know, we could still blow up the planet. Well, the possibility we're in right now, we can save the planet. You know what I mean? If we let the waters loose, if we love the planet, if we look past the commercial world, we have to put our boot on the neck of the commercial commerce to see the mercantile world. That has to come into arraignment. Otherwise, if we allow that to continue to rule, we will lose this earth, and we will lose, within 200 years, we will meet the next exploding factor when the new house, you know, and the whole entire universe will fall on a 2222. There's no opportunity to survive that unless we've already ramped into the C era right now. Let's say anybody there.
Okay, so I just want to
Michael,
say,
that's an interesting thing to say, but I don't see how you can avoid bringing the past and the future. That's literally what the
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm getting at. They all simultaneously exist. Go ahead.
Hold on. I'm talking
Yep,
to
I'm done.
Michael. So Michael wrote an interesting thing. Maybe someone can read it out loud. But my point is that in the Lotus Sutra, there's an entire verse about how karma works. And it states that there's a certain consciousness you have to have in order to understand how karma really works. Not the Newtonian, not the sin idea, but how karma actually is manifest and latent, and it has effects that don't seem direct, and it's very quantum. And it says specifically that only Buddhas can share the understanding. That's what it says. No, I don't see how we can avoid bringing the past into the future. I'm not sure that it would be a good idea, even. But
I think,
and your point said, you know, in literal literature, even talking about the fact those that don't know the past are doomed to repeat it. So I agree with you 100%. If we don't understand the algorithmic loop that we're in, we won't know when to jump ship, when to change ship, when to change course, when the variant can be altered. You know what I mean? Because we have to pay attention to everything all at once. You're absolutely right. In every frequency, there's frequencies going on in the hundreds of thousands and the millions range. I mean, every single tower starts out at a 1,000,000 watt, tower. And you have to break it down, divide it by 1,000, multiply it by 11, divide it by 25. We end up at 440. I mean, that's as simple as math they get. They want it 439.
Those numbers are
everything
small
works
numbers.
like that.
These are small numbers in the universe.
okay, let me create an idea for us all here.
Please do it.
I think that, well, what I see here in studying the work that I do is we ourselves, ideas start somewhere. There's a birth point to generational, so-called generational sins, a birth point to bad activities, and a birth point to good activities that affect future generations, because it's a generative function of the fractal of life. What is life? Life is fractals. What do fractals do best? They reproduce. They reproduce self-similarly in recursions of self-reiterative forms.
Cellular division. Notice it's always divided.
So hang on.
I'm not trying to argue with you, but I just want to point out that,
Yeah.
that all the sutras say when you start talking about the Dharma, you've got to throw out the idea of good and bad.
Okay, so take this. That's fine. I'll take your sentiment. So take this idea here as an idea plasmoid. Okay? Now you create an idea in your family, or you do an action, and it recurs throughout your family. Whether it's a good thing that produces rewards and growth and branches, or a bad thing that produces chaos and depression and suicide, or whatever it is. We are fractal body and mind fields, and we create beginning origins of things. That's the alpha. And we also we close the plasmoid and create an object that we can throw away, burn, sacrifice, get rid of, feel guilty for, feel burdened by. This plasmoid in your life, in your idea, is you being the beginning, the beginning of the idea and the end of the idea. You can stop thinking bad thoughts. You have the mentality to have power over your mind and your body. And if you are a heart thinker and a heart-centered person, you are implosive and you are gravitative, and people move towards you, and you are loving and other people move in. And your arms go out. And if you are a radiative person, but this is the thing. This is what causes the dynamic of the dichotomy here of bipolarism and psychopathy, is that we have both jets. We're not just one thing. When someone says they're one thing, it hurts my feelings always, because they put themselves in a closed box. Because you can open yourself up and close yourself at any time. This is what falling in love is, and falling out of love, falling in love, falling away and out of love. There's a life. What I want to get here is that life is in your heart, and life is in your mind, and you are the creator of giving life to other people. And as you are more able to promote growth in living plants and families, and your wealth grows because of your generative forces of being able to maintain a stable life and society and giving to others. This is what I wanted to close this little talk, whatever I said here with, is generativity and looking out for the next generation. People don't talk about generativity enough. This is very seldom talked about.
Not in my house.
I would say that there's good reasons that there's so many things to talk about.
Yeah. So generativity.
They don't realize how important it is.
Okay, the term generativity was coined by the psychoanalyst Erik Erikson, I don't know who that is, 1950, to denote a concern for establishing and guiding the next generation. We so often say in culture, oh, the next generation can acquire our debt. The next generation can take care of this. Oh, we'll pollute this river until the next generation, or 2, 4, 5 generations down the road, can finally live in this irradiated land, or whatever, irradiated land. But he first used the term while defining the care stage in his theory of the stages of psychophysical development. It's care. It's care. It is love. It is looking forward to the next generation. And
Well, this is why Confucius made family the center of a healthy nation.
And together we are united. When a family is united, the strongest thing about a nation is the individual family units. And when they start dividing, then things start breaking up.
Once upon a time, it used to be that 3 or 4 generations lived in one house. That's why you had duplexes and everything. Look at how they killed the cell of the family and the division of the nuclei.
No, I'll say to combat that statement, that's already happening again. There's multi-generational housing on a massive scale because
yeah, it's coming back. You're absolutely right. It's coming back. But I'm saying they purposely made a 2-income home. You know what I mean? They sliced the family by dividing it, making sure no one was there to raise their children. They created the programs that subsidized the time of a child in a very inappropriate way. And like you said, now the family nuclear, I do agree, it is coming back. But they subverted it for a reason.
Let's be careful to not say they, because we are that organism. And when
no, you're absolutely right. Thank you. Yeah, that's why I'm still here. You're absolutely right. I'm accountable for my omission.
When the Satanists...
I think we have to understand the definition of the word family, buddy. And I think that, we may look at family as a degrading concept, but what we don't see is that families are cropping up all over the place. As a gay man, I can tell you that family means something very different to me than it does to many of you. And the concept of family is, in my world, a group of people who become my family by choice, not my parents who rejected me because of my sexuality. My family is created by me, as is everything in my world. So, the nuclear family may be falling apart, but the nuclear family hadn't saved us. The nuclear family has not been our salvation. And so the death of the nuclear family is really the rising of another kind of idea, which is that every fucking one of us are a member of my family. There is no human being on the face of the planet who's not a member of my family. And we understood that once. So when we talk about the death of the family, I have to roll my eyes, because what we don't understand is that family means you and me right now, not your dad has to,
Michael,
the fact that
when did we understand? When were we ever unified? When did we understand that we were one with everything? What culture?
I believe that we once were a one world culture, and that there was a greater understanding of community as opposed to competition.
But
I believe the concept of...
Isn't that becoming... Isn't that the choice of pro-choice? Or sorry, no.
Let's let Michael finish, and then I have my own response. So let's let Michael finish.
Well, I basically made my point, which is that the concept of family is a much broader term than we in our own little cultures have defined it. And the concept of unity is overarching above and beyond family. So the nuclear family is certainly a productive unit, but it doesn't include the broad spectrum of what we understand and create and live as family. The concept of family is not a reproductive unit. The concept of family is the idea of cooperative interrelatedness.
Well,
and so
that's sketchy. I think that's sketchy because if first off, if it takes a village to raise a child, then all of a sudden the child is not yours, it's the state's. So there's really, really fine line territory here of the world.
That's a lens. That's a very narrow lens to look at understanding all of humanity as a member of one's family.
But I see it as a loophole of having to go through in order to understand our universality, is what I'm saying. So we're going to go through that.
Bottom line, if we can't, here's my thesis, and then I'll step back and hear the response. The bottom line is if we can't think inclusively as all of us being members of one in the grandest sense, then we will self-terminate. Self-termination is the inevitable outcome of otherizing and enemizing our fellow man. And if we can't understand the idea of the universality of man, of cogent humanity, if we must carry our need to otherize and evilize and demonize each other into our future, then we don't have a future. And if we can understand that all human life and all life is valuable and equal in value, then we do have a chance at a future. But the idea of family, as defined by you guys, is very, very narrow and doesn't even apply in my own personal world.
So I have a response. It's somewhat lengthy. I wanted to see if anyone else wanted to quickly respond. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So
remember, try to keep your thoughts centered on life, generativity, cavitation, just towards that direction.
Buddy, just let me speak.
Sorry.
Oh, when I got this tattoo of the bodhicitta on my left hand, the ideal of the bodhicitta is to bring enlightenment to all beings, to remain in the samsara until that's completed. Having gone through the process for a while, I've come to also realize that there is a function to diversity, a function to the fact that there are people that are dissonant, and they are not my family. And I'm going to tell you that when I watch ISIS roll a tank over top of a man who has one leg, those people are not my family. But it's only because at the moment they are resonating with an equal frequency and not with their original frequency. So the core within every person, which is sometimes called the uncarved block, it's sometimes called the Buddha mind, the Christ mind, the Krishna mind, that core is my family. And I have compassion on a level for that. But there has to be separation in the same way that a child parent has to be. You can't be your best friend to your kids at all times. It's unhealthy for them. You have to have boundaries. There has to be a set of morals. And there are ideals that in the world that are holdovers from a time when humanity was suffering and we were a co-sufferer.
This set of rules, is it conditional on family? This set of rules that you described, is that conditional on the definition of family to you? In other words, if I break your rule, I'm no longer your family.
So
it's conditional.
Are you gonna?
So it's
let me ask.
right?
Let me answer your question. If you're gonna ask me a question, let me answer it. If a family is a unit of people that are they're harmonizing together, and they have some cultural agreement and some mores and some norms that they are agreeing with, and there's love, we have to accept that there's going to be one family that does not have the same. They don't have love. There's going to be Hatfield and McCoys. There just are. I mean, it's in nature. I don't know what to do about it. It's part of nature. And
I disagree.
Well, you can disagree, but you're disagreeing with Mother Nature herself.
I'm aware that I can. I just did.
Yeah, I mean, you can feel free.
You don't speak for nature. This is the problem that I struggle with, is that
I speak for physics.
We feel so. No, you don't. You speak from personal knowledge and experience, and you speak absolutely
in history
as though
study
what you say is fact and what everyone else says is opinion.
I'm not saying it's
fact.
That
is speaking from ego, my friend.
I'm saying that I've observed.
You are speaking from your knowledge that you've gained, and you are repeating what you have learned. Your education is not subject to my worldview.
You're proving my point right now.
I'm sure I am, but the point that I'm making is different than the point that you're making. And you're responding to my point.
Exactly, you are. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, we're on two different pages. It's not hard to understand.
People will be dissonant. That is, and it's something that if we really want to have compassion for people, what I've observed is I have to accept that they are going to be dissonant. They are not always going to agree. Families themselves are not going to always agree. People within families are not always going to agree, and that's not to love them is to love their core, because you can't always love their behavior. You can't.
So you have this idea that the perspective that's different than yours is this sort of naive Pollyanna perspective where everything is love and joy. That serves your perspective well, but it doesn't describe my perspective at all.
That's fine. I can accept that it doesn't describe your perspective. I can accept that. That doesn't bother me.
Perfect.
So then the request would be not to attribute it to me.
I don't know what I haven't attributed anything to anyone. What I've said is that when I went and observed, I found that in my quest to uplift the enlightenment of the species, I have to reject things that are not enlightened. And then when I reject those things, I have to do so consciously. And I love the core, but I have to separate myself from ideologies which are not egalitarian, which are not supportive of liberty for all. And when that happens, there are going to be people who disagree, and some of them will even want to harm me or my children or my people, my family. And I accept that they're there, but I don't accept that we are family together. Does that make sense? I mean,
that's totally reasonable, and this is what I'm been talking about since the beginning of this episode. Life. What is life? What is in the containment of life? I see a lot of people behaving with way different sexual rules that are legal in different countries that the United States abhors. So, I mean, legal age limits, all sorts of different things. These are idea bubbles, and these are ways of living. And either the United Nations comes in, the UN, New World Order. If you look up UNNWO, they actually have that now. They're claiming the New World Order on their website. Their ideal is to have us all drones with the same religion, and I'm against that. So this is what I'm saying. I can see both points of view here, but Michael McDuffie's view might lead to more of a universality, which is closer in line with the United Nations New World Order. So either way, man, they're moving in their agenda, no matter what we do. And I look at it like, here's Buddhism, here's Hinduism, here's Maharati, anything. Here's Christianity, here's Scientology. They're all peduncles off of each other. They're all.
Well, I'm not saying that Michael's ideas are moving us closer to the New World Order. That's not a thing that I'm saying.
I said I can see some of his philosophies aligning with it, but I can see some of mine aligning with it too.
But mankind has always supported tribalism is common even without communists and
you're always going to have it.
Tribalism. There's always been and it's a yin yang dynamic, the collective and the individual. And we've had a society for the last, I don't know, few decades that has accepted plurality and individuality together. But that doesn't stop certain people from forcing one or the other and trying to make everyone accept one or the other. And if we are going to accept all the different people, then we let them try until they go to a certain point, in which case then it becomes unreasonable. But
this is the unreasonable number that you just said. Dunbar's number is a suggested cognitive limit to the number of people with whom one can. Dunbar's surveys of village and tribe sizes also appeared to approximate this predicted value. It's 150 people. Dunbar's number. It's really interesting when you look into it, and this has a lot to do with life and the propagation of life.
Biological.
And us as human beings and how much we can tolerate one another. At approximately 150 people, the relationship of the tribe breaks up and it disbands or becomes two or splits and more people, but that's the average size. There's a bunch of stuff around it, a bunch of research. It's interesting to look into, but that's probably not true. I mean, we have thousands of people on our thousands and millions of people on different groups now with social media. We've surpassed Dunbar's number.
All of them, family close is really, that's a deep implication. I mean, you're talking magical stuff when you're talking the word family. You're talking a connection there that transcends time and space. And
in the biggest sense, what I'm saying is that we have to shed ourselves of our training wheels if we're going to fly. And
That's-
the bottom, and so with respect to understanding universal consciousness, with respect to understanding the cosmos, all of the big picture questions that ultimately each of us have discovered that we share a desire to understand and seek more clearly, there are limiters that are placed on our minds. And the idea of the other, the idea of the enemy, the idea of the bad guy, the fear of the shadow, these are all limiters that have been placed on us consciously as a species, as a whole. So when we talk about current politics, I think we're thinking too small. What I'm saying is that if we're going to evolve, if we're going to step into the next great era, if we're going to have the discrete nonlinear phase shift that we all sense in our spirits is about to occur, we're going to have to change the filters through which we see the universe. That is the nature of evolution. That is the mechanism by which we begin to understand these new ways of looking at the universe. And the only way for us to do that, so for example, let me give you another example. If we destroy the Amazon rainforest, we destroy with it all of the inherent knowledge that forest brings to us and offers to us.
Yeah.
We no longer have that biodiversity from which to draw from to create our own technology. In the same way,
and
we
that's
put
space
limiters on, if we enemize each other, if we look to destroy or see that sort of game theory, for example, is not a way of life that we can carry with us into the future, because game theory is self-terminating. Hatred of other is ultimately self-terminating because it's hatred of self, because you are other and other is you. And once you understand that you are other and other is you, and nobody gets out of this unless everybody gets out of this, and that we will not succeed at the expense of others, we will not progress, period. It will not happen. So we will start over or we will survive. And it's going to be one or the other. And I don't think dragging the past with us is going to work. And I don't think fantasizing about an ideal future is going to work. I think we have to look at practical application of the reality of the tools that are given to us right now. And the reality is that if we cannot understand that when we hurt another human being, we hurt ourselves. When we destroy another form of life without a benefit or a purpose, that benefit and purpose is lost, and therefore our future is filled with holes. If we're going to have a solid future framework on which we can travel, we're going to have to overcome the sense that there is other, because there is no other. There is only us.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, hard. It's a pretty hard statement, and it seems.
I have to take it. I'm going to take it because we're going to go back into 0 point energy, the spirals, spires, life, and Brownian gas and Brown's gas. And I'm just hopping right back into the episode because we can get political. We can all talk. We have backroom chatter.
He's not talking politics. He's not talking. That's philosophy.
Philosophy, anything. I just want to go back towards the episode. We can talk about this a little bit later.
I didn't know we had a goal.
Yeah, I have quite a bit that I want to cover. There's Doctor Strange, there's Moray B. King, there's
So for the record, just so that everybody knows, Buddy shared the goals of the conversation when we started. That was established in the beginning. So I'm not trying to be a
for the record, I was having lunch.
We all know the goal. We should know the goal. I mean,
yeah, every week we have I have some presentation, then I open it up for a little bit, and then but all right. So Brighton, are you around here?
That was a really passive. Hold up, that was a really passive. That's the second passive aggressive thing today, Michael. I don't know what's the deal, but that's not cool, man.
Yeah,
well, these are. To the extent that you're offended, that's not my goal.
I'm not saying I'm offended. I'm saying
but you make statements that require response, and when you say something that is on its face untrue based on your own ignorance, I have to staff that out, because I'm not here to perpetuate your agenda. I'm here to seek truth.
Are you here to be passive aggressive?
Your agenda is your agenda, and you can perpetuate it all you like. But in all honesty, when you talk about the past and your education, and you apply that to conversation as though it's fact because you know it, that offends me, and so it puts me on edge.
I'm glad that it offends you.
And so I will continue to support you when I believe that you're speaking truth, and I will continue to stand against you when I believe that you are saying something that
Well, then I
does
just
not
ask that
align
you
with
be
what I
honest
believe.
about it. Then
And
I
that
ask you to
isn't
be
personal.
honest about
That's
it, and not be passive aggressive.
that's not an attack on you personal. Although I am pointing out that I think that you are
See.
ego-driven as opposed to truth-driven on numerous occasions. So
Truth,
that's as honest as I can be with you about my perspective,
that's
and
that's
and I take
you're
responsibility
being
for whatever
honest.
outcomes that
But let me be
provides.
honest with you.
Yeah,
I
please
think
do.
that when you're being passive aggressive, it doesn't show strength.
How I'm presenting myself as honestly and directly as I possibly can.
That is honest. What you've just been, that's honest. But
Well,
what you
so
did
here's what you have to understand. This isn't my
seconds
show,
ago,
and it's not your show. So I have a responsibility to contribute to the best of my ability.
how did that
And when
contribute? How did it contribute?
because it exposed disinformation.
No, it was just being dickish.
Guys, we're gonna edit all this stuff out, but I do have to say something to kind of ameliorate the situation here. I have my own opinion about life. We all do, and in this show, it's multi-religious, it's multi-scientific, and we have to be able to juggle multiple perspectives at once. Sometimes people say this is the way it is. I often am matter of fact, and that I shouldn't be as much matter of fact and say this is it. This is the way it is. This is what this is. Sometimes, and I know Ramon. He sometimes is matter of fact as well. I think it's semantics that some of us are arguing about because I know we get excited, and my perspective, I don't really push Christianity or hard. I know a lot of information about it, but I don't say that that's the way it is. I say according to that faith, that's the way. That's what they believe, or according to some truths, or some what they believe. I just like to see. I don't know if a group can consciously do this. I don't know. I mean, but we've been doing it successfully so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not bothered by anybody on here's different perspective. It doesn't bother me the least. I just don't want passive aggressive vitriol. That's all. It's pretty straightforward.
So can you agree, Ramon, that sometimes you say, as a matter of fact,
Of course I do.
Yeah,
I
do too.
this real quick.
Too.
Everything that I say has an invisible, in my opinion, at the end of it.
Yeah, I find that unacceptable. That as an
Too bad.
part.
Too bad,
Well,
Michael.
So
it's how I'm built.
It's
how I'm built.
You're better than that, and you're capable of more.
You are, Ramon.
I'm always better than I am actually in reality. My potential is always exceeding.
You're being asked to
I'm not being asked. There's nothing being asked, Michael. You're demanding.
Openly refusing to do that, and so
you're demanding. That's why.
Oh well, I will work on being more less demanding.
I don't care if you do or don't.
But I think that
the
point is that if you and I are incapable of effectively communicating, bending to each other's ability to hear and understand, then what does that say about the world that we're trying to change, Ramon?
It says exactly what I've been saying, which is sometimes people are going to disagree, man.
See, now, Michael, that statement right there, I'm not trying to change the world. You guys might be. I'm just presenting information. I appreciate the discoveries that I find. I'm thankful for them, and I love to share them with everyone. I know this movement's going to affect some people. If it even affects one or two, I'm excited for that. But I think the movement's going to be more geared for the next generation of children, because we talk about subjects that are just a little bit too advanced around the fringes.
So how is so when you open your museum exhibition, did you expect that it would be shut down and no one would ever see it? Was it an act that was beneficial in and of itself, or did you create it in order to influence others?
Right.
I don't know that story.
Well,
what story is this?
That's a good question, Michael, and I don't care.
I don't believe you when you say you're not willing to change the world. I don't see any evidence in your actions to suggest that you have no interest in changing the world. Virtually everything about you is focused on changing the world, buddy. So I question the sincerity of your statement.
Well,
check
I agree
this
with
out.
Michael. I think that all of us are here. I agree with Michael that all of us are here to transform. We each have
That's
a different vision.
That's true. I mean, we all know that we are inherently here to do that. That's not on the top of the line of my goals, I would
Okay.
say.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I would say
It's fine.
giving this information.
Well, listen, it's
Disseminating.
aspirational, right? I mean, in my life, the desire to change the world is very real, but I
Right.
understand it very clearly as aspirational and not something that I may ever actually accomplish. So it acts as a beacon toward which I travel, as opposed to a destination that I expect to arrive at. That particular, the changing the world concept.
That's cool.
Okay, you guys ready to continue? I love you all, and I appreciate that we can agree to disagree and continue because we're all adults here, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
sweet.
I hope that
Much
I've made
presentation.
my criticisms are
3,
points that I
2,
understand.
1, play.
I apologize if I offended.
All right. I'm gonna put it on. It looks like it's 26 minutes, so about 10 minutes. So this is a little break, guys. I'm gonna put myself on mute. I'm gonna put this on full screen. We're gonna listen to it. I've never heard this, so I'm excited to see it. I've heard Moray B King before, but honestly, I haven't seen this one. I don't think. Otherwise, I would have known more about the Doherty set before Don Scott, because this is an old video. But I did start to learn more about this direction because of Verbelli and all this cavitation. So that being said, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to put myself on mute and
When you're ready, press play. Got some glitchy action.
If we get a lot of these entities circulating, we can create coherence by vortex action. The Beltrami vortex, we credit Don Reed, our audience. Now let's give Don a round of applause. He's been doing work since the 70s on this. I think he's been terrific as far as. I like to acknowledge my references when they're in the audience. Go back. So if I just did the force-free vortex, he showed a lot of the Beltrami vortex, dug up a ton of support for this idea. But basically, the curl is the vector is in the same direction as the vector, and likewise, its magnetic field. It's a natural form. Plasmids want to organize this way. They do pair production in the plasmas. Turbulent plasmas want pairs, counter-rotating pairs of vortices in the plasma. It's just like pair production in the vacuum. Excuse me. We have these filaments, vortex filaments, that can go into higher order filaments. And you can see structure upon structure and self-organization being built up out of a turbulent substrate. Likewise, the clothes and the plasmoids. We can look for anomalies in tornadoes. And they're essentially, you can see, they're essentially plasma entities. And we had these guys last year with you, thunderbolts. The sun, right? All sorts of plasma filaments across the sunspot. Look at that. They have a filament that reaches across the sunspot. That's over 600 miles long as a plasma vortex. All that could be coherent as zero-point energy. The corona of the sun could be coherent. Galaxies could be coherent, right? Any vortex form of plasma has the opportunity to cohere the energy. So that could be a dark matter explanation. Who knows? We can make technologies. Lots of free energy machines were invented around this principle. Schauberger is the most famous. He gets this anomaly with a vortex, water jet turbine. We're saying it's over unity and things like that. Of course, nobody believes him. And then Wells, with a similar thing, using the working fluid of cooking oil, did the same thing, very similar turbine, presumably being a self-running device. One of the later ones of this last decade was the Vortex implosion device by Haskell, who teamed with Ron Rockwell. And you could read about it. I think this was earlier. It wasn't this last one. And there's a great essay on the Panacea site, how they went wrong. Some of the best of the energy devices, I didn't know about a lot of them, of the last 10 years, they mentioned in this essay. Everybody that had very big effects, all of them got suppressed. So basically, there we are. This is Don Reed's contribution. That the Beltrami vortex in the plasma is the self-organizing principle. It is the key to unlocking the vacuum. We see it over and over again in different ions, inert gas clusters, where you have the charged water gas clusters associated with Brown's gas. And if you can take any of these clusters and further circulate them in a bigger vortex, you can get a further entrainment perhaps. And you can start trying ideas like this. Taking the Brown's gas, dissolving water, and then making vortexes out of the water. 4 degrees comes from Schauberger. This is the highest density water. And keep building up the energy coherence. So vortices then could entrain the vacuum energy. It could be that simple. That's the miracle. So basically, the zero-point energy and the self-organization coming from Prinogene's work create the energetic clusters of plasmoids or inert gas, EVs, and now the cavitation re-entry jets can have it at the tip of those re-entry jets in the water crystal, and then making larger swarm vortices of plasma and the various implosion technologies. So the real key to changing the world is share the information, put it up on the web, and it will make a new world. Thank you.
Okay, so the reason I shared this is to get to the point of this episode. What is life? Life is implosion. Life is cavitation, vortical coherence. It is how we think and how we take in thoughts out of galactic structures. And we don't have thoughts. Thoughts have us. We don't have our thoughts have us. And we are a collective, and every thought adds to the color of the rivers and pollutes or taints the stream and beautifies life and defines what life is. So life, excuse me, is coherence. Coherence. Life is inside of we have NewsHour coming up here. And what I want to say is life is inside of laminar coherence, spin density, and how the Bessel function and how the geometry, which channel it chooses to move through and cavitate through. That's why we see Fibonacci spirals, phi spirals, life spirals, broccoli, almost everything spirals, archalic, and this spiraling fluid going into the NewsHour, it's going to be good because I think Verbelli has a lot to say about this video that's in Russian or something like that, and a lot of new information's coming out. I'm pushing, they're looking at the geometry that I'm doing on electric universe geometry, and they're posting on it. Go see. It's freaking sweet. Actually, we're gonna hop into NewsHour right now because it's 3 o'clock. 6/6/2020. All right, I'm gonna close a bunch of these so we got more RAM, random access memory. And we're going to go to the face. And while that face loads, because it takes time, I want to say that these galactic insemination devices are already here in our heads, and we have the bodies to propel them forward and to move and to break and bind any types of other plasmas or goo that might be around us, which could be looked at as a curse, because sometimes people curse others and hex others, and I don't particularly agree with that myself, but it's a real thing, and it produces goo around your body, and you have to break that off and get away from it.
It's pretty fun. The goo, because that's a homonym for the Chinese word for parasite. That's hilarious to use, because it took me a second. You mean GOO, right? That's what you meant.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Earlier, when you had brought this up, you were talking about an analogy of this is love, this is a relationship, this is all of these different things, and it brought me to an analogy that's more of an experiment that you can do with someone to understand how arguments and relationships work, which is if you stand next to someone and you have your feet a foot apart, both of you have your feet a foot apart and a foot apart, so it's kind of like a square between your feet, and you put your hands up and you push, and the other person pushes back, and if they are able to push you, and you have to keep your legs straight, you can't step. If you step back from the push, then you lose, and that's how it goes. But what happens is if you fight with someone, when you're fighting, when you're pushing, they say something nasty, you say something nasty, they say something nasty, you say something nasty, all you're going to be doing is fighting until someone knocks over. But if someone pushes at you with nasty comments or attacks or whatever it is, and you just let your hands go, they are probably going to knock themselves over and not you. An analogy for the bubble cavitation with relationships.
Interesting.
I have a statement about goo. Goo is the state between caterpillar and butterfly. Caterpillars literally don't just grow wings, they become fluid before they become butterflies. Goo is an actual state between two forms.
Yeah. What's the name of it? I forget. There's a name that the butterfly turns into. It's a really cool name.
It's called, in
its goo form.
Yeah, no, it's, I don't know. But it is goo. It actually does become a semi-liquid form and recreate itself as a butterfly, which I never really thought about before. I just learned that like yesterday. So that's my goo contribution.
Well, here's to add to that, caterpillars don't have sex. Think about that. They just eat and eat to go to the chrysalis, and then finally, once they're butterflies, they have sex and die. If they're lucky, they live a day.
Well, what they consume in the caterpillar form, they give back, and this is the cycle that we have to attain in order to, I think, reach the next level of humanity. They give back as butterflies because butterflies are the primary fertilizer, the primary pollinator of the plants that they eat.
Oh, right, yeah.
So it's a complete cycle. It's not a circle; it's a cycle.
Yeah, the food cycle. It's the food cycle, man. It's the food chain. It's what we've been talking about, trying to figure out each creature, because every one of these spheres is a gate, and every gate is a creature. It's a pair.
And the goo is the natural form of the Z-pinch. You think of the space between caterpillar and butterfly is the Z-pinch.
Mm-hmm.
Then that goo state is, I think, what we are all entering ourselves. I think that culture, society, religion, philosophy, science is becoming goo. We're entering a fluid state. And I think that if we're going to survive it, we're going to have to understand the nature of the fluidity with which we live. And that fluidity, is sort of intrinsic to my ideas about the all life must identify all life as valuable and equal to all life. I think that's a philosophical idea that will carry us to the next more solid form. But when in a time of great change, great fluidity is required, and everything about us, humanity, all human beings, everything that we know about ourselves, teaches us that we are designed to adapt. We are highly adaptable. Babies don't develop the capacity to hold their heads up until they're 3 months old, and they can't mostly walk until they're over a year old. Many children don't even talk until they're 2. So if you take, say it takes 2 years for a child to walk, and you think in terms of like what an antelope takes to walk, it's like 20 minutes, right? So we have developed this fluidity, this flexibility, because we are so adaptive to our environment. We are required to adapt to our environment outside the womb because of the adaptive nature of inherent in our life form. So these things start to, I don't know if I'm off track here or not, but I guess, I realize I'm sort of throwing out this really high standard for us, and I apologize if that seems sort of intrusive, but I do think that there is a way, and I think that that way is clearly before us. And so I want to, I guess sometimes I'm kind of a hard ass, so I want to also not be a hard ass and say that I think there's a way forward.
Well, I did want to say that I agreed with the very first part that you talked about, and I want to point out that we already have a lot of the science. We already have a lot of the science to do that cycling that you're talking about, and the issue is we aren't. There was a presentation given on TED a long time ago, where he talked about the whole purpose of the TED conference, and he brought up that design and technology and engineering all need to change and become their own sustainable, resilient form of technology, entertainment, and design in order to create this cyclic understanding. So the individual sciences have been done, like aquaponics or solar panels, etc. All that's been done, but a lot hasn't been changed to create the entire cycle from the mining all the way to consumer level. All of that is not engineered this way. It's just evolved from a previous state of consumer, basically plunder economy. And I think that there's a lot of power. There's a lot of power in that.
But just for the sake of the thought experiment, let's say that every corporation was mandated to have net gain for all humanity. That the primary focus of every corporation, every business that has ever created must demonstrate community viability, individual viability, and corporate viability within itself, so that it wasn't just about increasing profit for shareholders. The goal was to manage the enhancement of all who are touched by and involved in that entity. It's a higher goal. It's a higher goal, right? But
yeah.
It's really
with
just
oversight.
It's really just tooling our incentive base. That's the bottom line. As long as we are incentivized by personal wealth in the form of a monetary symbol, we lose touch with reality in the very basest sense. In other words, a man can hoard money his whole life and feel that he's won on his deathbed, when in fact he's done nothing but lose.
I want to support Michael there, buddy, before you come down hard on Michael there, because as a capitalist, I have to say that there is a tendency among various people in capitalism to hoard and to prevent the flow and cycle of capital. And that's not the ideal of capitalism. The ideal of capitalism is cyclic flow. And it's actually what he's describing is in the interests of national security and international security. So there is a legalistic way of approaching it.
No, I wasn't.
Of course, it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope, but it's
I definitely wasn't going to come down on him. It's a little assumptive to say that, but
it's an oversight. I was reading what you're worries were. I
Well,
apologize.
it's okay. Honestly, I think there needs to be a lot of oversight. There's not enough regulation and oversight, and there's philanthropy, and if corporations move more towards philanthropy, then they'll have even more power. So it's more about control. It's not even about money; it's about control.
That's a good point. You have, I mean, I see both sides. I mean, I see what you're saying, but I also see what Michael said. There has to be a balance point, and without that balance point, we're in trouble.
Well, there has to be a sense of capitalism has adopted a linear trajectory, which means that as capitalism expands, it erodes its base. So it eats itself. The concept of capitalism as applied in today's society is the ultimate example of unsustainability. The alternative is a self-sustaining system where all boats float. I mean, the bottom line is that we just have to start looking at the whole and understanding that as we prioritize one group over another, that we create a system that's inherently unstable, and we must learn this lesson if we are to progress economically or otherwise.
Unfortunately, some people are going to start telling other people that they can and can't do certain things in their religions, and that's
so
when
you mentioned power, buddy. You mentioned power, and I have
control.
A very specific control. There, thank you. You mentioned control and all of its aspects. So we define control by power and money, and that's how we measure and monitor control in this society. So I believe that power and control are inherently energetically active concepts, that they are hard to handle for human beings. So, for example, I think that the hoarding of wealth is a mental disorder. And if you look at the life of Michael Jackson or any other number of people who've been showered with everything they ever wanted, it is an illness and it kills them. It's a sickness that leads to death. And I think if we understand that power must be held by all people, that is not to say that we have to have less central government or the one world order is going to take us over. What that means is that each of us as individuals must learn and teach our children to hold power with respect and to pass it readily. We should not have the desire to cling to and build power as an ethic in our society. Power is very, very dangerous, and power must be shared by all people. And the problem is not that rich people fuck us over. The problem is that poor people don't care at all. The problem is that we have taught people that they don't have power. Even if they did, they wouldn't know what to do with it, and so they should just hand it over because these are the people who understand power, and they will take care of everything. It's the distribution of power in culture that is killing us, and it is our abdication of power that is destroying us. The people who are taking the power are small. The people who are giving their power up are many. And personal responsibility, and the reason I'm kind of a hard ass is because I have come to understand that I tolerate power, and I consent with silence, and I refuse to continue to do that. I am no longer going to consent with silence, and I am going to call out abuse of power or whatever I see to be antithetical to my truth in a way that is either going to alienate me or ingratiate me with others. And I leave that to you.
I've taken it upon myself with my students to teach what I call empowerment, and it's a different science than the alchemical pursuit of a material form of power. And there's dozens of forms of power. Empowerment is absolutely something I think that every generation deserves. Every individual deserves the opportunity. They won't all take it. That's the other thing, is that you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. We can certainly strive for an ideal of providing an empowerment system. That's why I advocate teaching martial arts in elementary and middle schools, because it's actually good for bullies when they get punched in the nose, and then they make friends. They make friends with the kids. Now, once they get older, then it turns to crime, then it turns to felony. But when they're young, if they get punched in the nose by the nerdy boy, or the, if the boy gets hit by the girl and he gets kicked in the nuts, they learn something. And I think that empowerment is incredibly important. Dealing with the issue of actual accumulation of material, militaristic, destructive power, raw power, and the unfortunate bottlenecking and total control, which I know, Buddy, you would be against, of the electrical power to keep it in the hands of the few, like diamonds or something. I think that is a related but not necessarily the same issue, and we should look into ways of exploring how we can, if we're designing intentionally or unintentionally, if we're designing a movement or a transformative space, whatever you want to call it, whatever is correct or acceptable these days, then we should probably look into those different sciences and meta sciences that will affect that, and look towards ways of quote arming people. And I mean it, of course, with knowledge, but sometimes I mean it literally. So it just depends on the subject.
So if we can combine autonomy and individuality with a singular purpose, imagine what we're capable of. And I'm talking on every level: emotionally, spiritually, technologically, and in the expansion of space and time. If every single human being on the face of this planet focused their time and their efforts, i.e. their energy, on a single outcome, what could we not accomplish? The list is pretty fucking small. That is an equal distribution of power over an entire electrical grid, which creates a span capable of something exponentially greater than the individual focus and purpose. Can we identify ourselves as individuals and parts of a whole? And I think that's the problem with ego, is that the capacity to hold two ideas in your head at once. It's this thing might be true, but also this might be true. And these are the reasons I believe this, but there are all these reasons why I believe this. And if these reasons get questioned, I have to reconsider this. I reconsider my thesis every day. And I hope that we are all in the position to be fluid enough to do so. And I think if we can say, for a time, for a week, for a month, the whole planet is going to agree that this is a course of action and this is an outcome that we intend to accomplish. I am telling you, I have seen human beings coordinate their ideas, and we are capable of amazing things. And I believe this is the Z-pinch. This is the fluid state. This is the potential for the future. If we can harness and focus our energy as one being and not be scared that the Illuminati are going to take over, then I'm sorry. I'm just being sarcastic for the sense of humor. I'm not trying to put that on anybody. I don't know. I don't know your relationship with the Illuminati, and I don't care. I'm just trying to say that there are things that frighten us about our capacity to focus as in unison as a species, and I think that those fears are unwarranted. And I would even suggest that we have been told that unifying as a single species is terrifying, because it might be that once we do it, we will discover that there are others out there who would really prefer that we not develop the capacity to function at our grayest, highest level, because that would then become a problem for them. Or it would become a solution for them, and they would finally reveal themselves to us, and we could join a much greater universe. These are ideas that I have in my head. I don't really give a shit about whether or not little girls kick little boys in the balls, because I think that those little boys probably deserve it. I don't think that that's a challenge to the balance of the universe. But I think it really, going forward, we have to start to see if all the shit you guys talk about is real, then from my sociological humanistic perspective, this is what it means.
Okay.
I'm copying pasting this John Edmark. If you guys have ever heard of John Edmark, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael McDuffie, and for your heartfelt sentiment and all your wisdom, as usual. We're we're going to continue to transition into the spire life and cavitation. We are still open in a conversation, but if I could just point this out, because this is what we were talking about earlier, guys. I was at this conference. Maybe not this exact one, but I was there with John Edmark. That's not John. I was there when John did the talk. But these are toys that he made, and I met John, and I aspire to do more work like him, and I can do all the work that he has done with the Doherty set sculptures. And this is where Michael McDuffie, you might be totally in on this. I don't know if you've seen this guy's sculptures yet, but he rotates them and puts. This is just about chirality of spirals and stuff like that, and how they're connected, and basically like coherence and things like that. But there's other videos I don't have directly. But I was looking up phylotactic spirals, because this is how you get life out of the sun, and how life forms, the geometry of life forms that come out of the sun as beginnings or firstlings, or the beginning, more connected part to the sun, more fundamental helical filaments. I believe we all exist inside the first filament off of the sun. According to my research, everything is embryonic off of the first filament. And what I mean by that is I've gotten into it before. If I could look at the chat here and pull up the image, but it's nested filaments inside of filaments inside of filaments, and that's itself a coherence and intelligence coagulating out of the goo that we've been talking about. This might be why the black goo is so popular in the Illuminati circles, or Lady Gaga, and everything's goo, dark black goo. The best-selling perfume has like sperm in it and blood, and it's Lady Gaga's. And it's like, okay, what's that tell you about our culture? So at least one point it was the best selling.
That we crazy?
We're crazy. Hey, put some of that shit on. Spray it on me. Spray it on me.
Are we rolling into the news, continuing the news hour, or rolling into the sharing hour?
Well, honestly, I was trying to keep them to about 2 hours because it's the summer and it's beautiful weather.
Okay.
But I'm totally down for being here all the way till 4 o'clock. I'm at Eastern Standard Time. But yeah, that gives us 40 minutes to jump into more content.
I also work with Mikey Bergman that I think relates strongly to all of this.
I would love to see it. I was actually at the end. I just want to say one thing about a scroll. See the spiral on a scroll? There's a spiral, and the spiral is on the side. It's a 3D cut or 2D cut of a tube. So the tube, anytime you see spirals, they have tubes that are connected to them that they're suckling off of. There's external tubes and internal tubes, and that's why phylotactic spirals tend to be in their spiral configuration, because it's all sorts of different efficiency of space. But on top of that, it's also the individuality, because you can go pick 1,000 daisies and you'll never see 2 daisies that are the same. The idea that the idea of a snowflake being unique needs to be greatly enhanced to the point where it's diluted to, we understand as a society that all there is uniqueness. So identifying as a certain thing is whatever it is, but uniqueness is inherent in all scales on all things. So, and I want to say this, and so is extremities, extreme colors, extreme sounds, extreme, and most of the time it's the extreme people, the bold people, the extreme animals that that are culture creators, and that's important because I want us to understand life is culture creating. And to wrap this up, generativity is taking care of the next generation and looking out for them. And I'm extremely pro generativity, and I don't know if we can start a movement to just, that's usually what foundations are for. Foundations are created in expectation of future generations. That's what a foundation is. When someone starts, that's like a trust fund kid.
Let me ask you a question, buddy. Let me ask you a question, because I want to give you a little tension in your circuit, right? A little voltage.
Please.
Without the common, how can you have the extreme? Without the ordinary, how can you have the extraordinary? And without the dull, how can you have the bright? So, I mean, can we accept the fact that some people aren't going to? Not only they've heard about the unique of the snowflake, they just don't care, right? They don't care. They wouldn't care if water. They wouldn't care if water was writing letters to you during a positive interaction. They just may not care. I mean,
well,
they
we gotta make them care. That's our job here.
Exactly.
Our job is to make them care about how unique.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's my job. I mean,
well, I mean,
I want them to care.
I want
them to care.
Yeah. If I could say that there's part of my job, I would love to show people how unique every freaking flower is, that every atom is, and that uniqueness comes from a trail, a cavitation trail, and that it is the trail that makes and carves the snowflake into the shape that it is. And because there's no two trails that are the same. So, and I guess I could.
About a scary experience I had once.
Please.
So a Taoist came to stay with me, and I took him to a waterfall that's in the midst of the Daniel Boone ley line. And usually I have no problem finding waterfalls, but this one was exceptionally difficult. And we went down this creek, and there were all these carcasses, and so I knew the water had been poisoned. And so I came to understand that the waterfall had hidden itself, and I had to look it up on LiDAR later to figure out how I missed it. But we even found a skull like put on a tree, like just kind of like put up there by, I mean, I live in Kentucky, so just imagine. So anyways, we're coming back out, and I'm with this Taoist, and so I'm sweating, I'm feeling transformed. It's beautiful, but I still don't know where this waterfall is. Along comes this ATV with a guy, and I presume his son on it, and they had bloodshot eyes, and I started talking to them excitedly and jabbering about, do you know where the waterfall is, and da da da. But the whole time he was looking at me, reading him, and he was just wondering if I knew where his meth lab was.
Oh my God!
Killed. My point is, we could have been killed.
Is that the story?
Yeah, that's the story.
Okay, I have a story. As an artist, I understand that a painting, a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional vision or perspective, is based on the understanding of how we represent shadow and light from one dimension to another. So I've discovered that helps me immensely in understanding the universe. This idea that the truth, reality, the description and our observation of the universe is based on the relationship of light hitting an object in the presence of shadow, the silhouette, the line, the space between dark and light is what I look for when I am abstracting from 3 dimensions to 2 dimensions with oil on canvas. So it is, in fact, intrinsic and absolutely indivisible, the necessity of light and shadow in expressing truth on canvas. The very nature of the interaction between those 2 things is how I create art. It's how I can make a sculpture with my eyes closed. I can feel the edge. I can imagine where the light hits and the darkness persists. And I see the truth in the intersection between those 2 forces. So it's that oneness that I keep trying to express that really is inherent in the mathematics and geometry that you guys talk about all the time. All I'm doing is translating what you say is true on paper into what I could imagine as a piece of art. It's a translation process that I'm using. I'm not smart. I'm just translating the data that you're communicating and coming back to you with the outcomes that it expresses on me.
And there's no way you can say you're not smart, though.
Well, I'm not saying. Well, okay, absolutely, and I wouldn't. I guess that you're absolutely right, and I think I should be careful about that. I think I'm fucking brilliant. I mean, I do. I have.
I think you know you are.
I do, and I'm not. And
oh, you know you're smart.
Otherwise, but I'm not credentialed. I'm not formally educated, and so I think that it's. I point that out almost as a point of pride, to the extent that I climbed this mountain by myself. I mean, I don't mean, oh, I'm stupid, and I can be self-effacing, but the truth of it is that Ramon, you're much more highly educated than I am.
Nah.
Here's the problem. You've sought out and received degrees of education, and I think that that's valuable and valid. Here's my problem, though. I had a boyfriend who was a music major, and he was impossible to listen to a song with. He literally was incapable of enjoying a song because he only heard it in the structure that he was trained to hear it in, and his capacity to enjoy a song or a musician on a visceral level had everything to do with whether or not that person first followed the rules of music that he had been trained to believe. So his capacity to enjoy music for its own sake was limited by his education. And so in that way, I brag.
Can Brighton, do you mind if Brighton shares? And I want to just say one thing here about this. This is what I keep talking about as far as the first gate off of the sun. Everything's umbilically connected to the first gate off the sun through food, through food chains and the solar cycle. But it's mostly, through food chains. But it all comes, and the first here is cephalization. There is a self-organization occurring at the head of the filament out here, and like Moray B. King was talking about in the presentation, there's coherence happening here, and coherence at the corona of the sun. The right around the sun. This is what I propose, and this flow of information, the galactic current coming out and coming in the sides, and information being multiply nested, and creatures being recurrent and based off of the other creatures, which are sexed filaments. Each one of these is a double torus. It's a DNA, and it's a double helix, and that's all I wanted to say. So Brighton.
All right, digging into it. You mind if I share the screen?
That's what I was going to ask, if you want to share the screen or link here. Let me stop sharing mine. Stop sharing. All right.
Oh.
Yes, please do.
Can everyone see my screen? Oh, hold on. Let me switch this
Yep.
over to the window capture because we're on live. I'm going to change this window capture to be on.
I would just hit the center, share entire screen. If you click the center,
Center.
like the
Use
icon in the
OBS?
middle, there's a little window. If you click the window, it does the whole screen and then allows you to share the whole screen.
I think I have to click SketchUp. Yeah, there we go. Okay. It's
Can you guys see the screen? I can't see.
You can't see.
Yes, I can see.
I can see you moving things around.
Happened last time, damn
Yeah.
it.
This
All
is
right, go.
OBS. I'm using
Go
going
ahead.
by. All right. Well, you want me to reset this, buddy, so you can see?
I don't know if it's gonna work. Just, I'd love to see it. It's just that this happens.
Yeah, because you're gonna flip if you see this. You're gonna go, oh, that's it. That's exactly it. Now, is it showing, buddy? All right. Well, this right here is a cube, and Mikey Bergman, he sent me these bicones that are spiral temples. And if I go view, I put this into an X-ray, you can see that the center of that all of these bicones are the inner radius of the square, and then they touch the very center of the solid. And so you can tessellate this like it's view this style X-ray, like it's a honeycomb where it's all space filling, and these are the gaps between as a cubic tessellation. But it doesn't end there. We have dodecahedrons nested inside the cube, or the cube nested inside the dodecahedron. The icosahedron, which is still being worked on, the octahedron nested inside, and the tetrahedron, which is the most fascinating to me, right here. And what you have are these bipyramidal structures that push out the energy of, well, the influx and the outflux. I can go ahead and take one of these and see 180 degrees and turn it by the top by 90. So what these are the structures of, well, the spiral temples, the wave conjugation. It's pushing out of bubbles. You can see this if you speak. When you speak, you release bubbles into the air. You're speaking out literal orbs, and those orbs are pushed out in a generative structure like this here. And right where these cone sections are is where the waveforms are being propagated from the orb that you speak out that's moving at the speed of sound.
Right. See, this is what I think our traveling habitats of the future are going to look like. This is the shape that we're going to live in and travel with, because this is a shape that could create gravity, and it could also be an energy generating shape as well. And then obviously, I mean, it could be large enough that you can create living space within something like that. That's, plus it has a greater capacity for spin and spiral, which I think are going to be the sources of energy and our trajectory of the future. So, yeah, I could see myself in there.
Well, it reminds me of some of the dice that the Romans had.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or
they're
like
odd
some
little
alien-looking egg.
Yeah.
But
Can I take the screen back, Brighton?
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful.
All right. What you guys were talking about here, the word of the day is helicoidal. Helicoidal is the definition of helicoidal is biology shaped like a spiral, a helicoid shell. Geometry, any surface resembling that of a screw thread. Helicoid, arranged in or having the general shape of a flattened coil or a spiral. So like the scroll, taking in the little scroll, ingesting the scroll, understanding what the spiral is, understanding the healing Kundalini energy, and the life force energy of Kundalini as sex drive being a good thing, because that's what all of nature's doing. But we have objectified and did a whole bunch of horrible things here in the United States with sex that I don't agree with. Like we almost fear it, and we've mixed it with blood and murder and all these twisted things on all these TV shows, that it's like there's never a nice, gentle, rarely a nice sexual experience that's shown on video. It's all demeaning and all this other shit. But anyway, so
just
that,
dropped visuals
I have to
in the
agree.
chat for you, buddy, so you can take a look and not be left out.
yes, please, yeah, put a link, because if you put a link in the chat, then I can play it again. And we can also, if there's pictures, please provide pictures.
Yeah, they're in the chat right now.
Awesome.
Hey, was that a turbocharger on the right, or was that one of those helicoids? Or are they the same thing? Is a turbocharger working off a helicoid?
Impeller, centrifugal pump.
Mm.
Helicoidal
It
impeller.
reminded me of a turbocharger.
Yep, it's a life force energy. When you have an impeller, it's different than a propeller. And we need to use our implosive technologies that are on the shelf and start using them. Thank you. So we can advance.
Implosive philosophies. Implosive
Yeah.
everything.
Amen.
Yeah, I agree.
That reminds me of
I
a
think that we did understand that at a point in our distant past, the power of the implosive as compared to the empower, because the power of the implosive is observable in nature. The explosion is a rare occurrence in nature, and it's I think the explosive energy is a lower form of energy that we can wean ourselves from, auto at all.
Just recognize that the live stream was private. No one ever saw it.
Okay, yeah, I'm not mad about it or anything. I mean, it is what it is, but let's plan on it. We talked a little bit about it, and Brighton's doing some awesome other stuff that I'm hoping we keep a secret until he surprises us, maybe if he's deciding to go that route with some of the stuff. This season would be really interesting. I'm seeing what he has drummed up, and I don't want to tell anyone.
Cool. It looks to me like he's slacking in the spaceship. Who is managing the helm there, sir? And there's a lot of buttons that are blinking.
Darth
no
Vader.
one seems to be touching them at all.
Yeah, that's the Imperial Star Destroyer.
I'm a little worried that you're not flying the ship right now. You're just chilling right now. It's concerning.
So, buddy, I actually knew a guy who designed a whole turbine car, and is based on that concept. And he even got $100,000 grant. $100,000 grant. But unfortunately, he also was a narcissist manipulator of people. So he used it to live off of and bought himself a Saab and smoked weed. But he had this design. So, it was called the Manx, the MANX. He even tattooed it on himself to make sure that he would build it. And it was this like kind of dildo shaped a little bit car. It was like small and lightweight, and it was supposed to run off of an impulsive energy like in a turbine.
You had to do though.
It was pretty cool, but I've never seen it actually come to fruition, which is the sad part, because he got $100,000 to make it. But whatever. I think it's still possible. It's still possible, to do. There is a turbine car in Jay Leno's garage. There is a fully turbine car from like 1961 or something.
Yeah,
and it's
cars were electric.
Gorgeous. No, it's not an electric car. I mean, it is, but it's a turbine car.
Yeah.
And it's pearl, and it's unbelievably beautiful. And it was not ever made in mass production because the company, I think it was Plymouth, decided that it was just a prototype, just make a few.
And if you ever get a chance to watch that episode of Leno's Garage, because that car is absolutely amazing. And obviously the turbines are quite loud at that period of time, but we could probably do it a lot better now.
When I think of all the technologies and discoveries that we didn't pursue because we couldn't figure out how to monetize them, it does really bring a tear to my eye.
Yeah, I think that car was a little loud, but mostly it's just they assumed that people didn't want it. And it's in like the electric car, the one that they made the documentary about, people loved that they loved that car, and then like took it back. So they could have made a ton of money on electric cars all this time, but they just didn't. You know, I mean, that car was really popular.
We have a whole lot more new
like
content in the Geometric View chat about Sandor Kabai. Not sure if all of you are familiar with this gentleman, but he's produced some phenomenal structures involving dodecahedral and icosahedral symmetry that are really astounding. The nesting, the space filling, the structural kissing of these geometric forms highlights, well, crystalline structures and bubble cavitations and all sorts of other funky.
See, this is my next sculpture. These are the things. Oh, look at, they're like toys.
Yeah, they're like cat toys. Actually,
Yay.
You can find a lot of cat toys like this. I'm very inspired by cat toys.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's weird, you know, like they have
also look
crazy.
like habitations. I can see, you know, I can see space stations here. Or Christmas ornaments, you know, pick.
It's the shape, you know, or Christmas ornaments.
Either one, really. Space station, Christmas ornament, you pick.
At some episode in the whatever you feel is appropriate, buddy, we need to talk about asymmetry.
Yeah, hell yes.
Long distance asymmetry.
That's what life is. We're the break in the symmetry. We are asymmetrical. Life is asymmetrical. So let's talk about it. We have 15 minutes.
Well, you know, I don't want to just hijack the direction. I just wanted to bring it up.
There is no direction right now.
It's impossible to survive if you're perfectly symmetrical.
Gareth and I were talking about this because he and Jim were observing that most of these stars that were in the pinches were actually not in the exact center of the pinches. They were off center a little bit. And when I look at like the hexagon of Saturn, and the octagon of Jupiter, they're not symmetric either. And I'm starting to think that it's not just kind of a lip service to polarity, but that there's something about asymmetry that defies our typical Euclidean geometric desires, and that it may be the thing that's you know, keeping us from having a fractal revolution where everything becomes like every engineering project, every bridge,
Right.
Because we're obsessed with. I mean, not that the Golden Gate Bridge isn't beautiful, or here in Kentucky we have the Roebling Bridge, which is the prototype for the Brooklyn Bridge. Those are beautiful, and I love the symmetry of them. I think that the arcs are amazing, but they're not how nature would typically do it. So how do we get to a place where we have these symmetries, but with the asymmetry still respected?
Well, I will say that charge itself is geometric, and it makes the geometry of what things are. So naturally, if you look at the distribution of charge, it's bilateral. That's why there's so much bilateral symmetry. And if you look at the distribution of charge, it's sexed. There is a male and a female energy of each creature, and each dispersion of energy. That is one of the most prominent.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
But not in bacteria. You know, there's other ways. I'm just saying this. Like layered species, there's a sexed division which allows for and I'm not saying that the two can't merge and become one, because if you look at bird species, you can't tell the difference between a male and a female robin. Whereas a
Yeah,
lot of
but if you apply to what he's saying here, is what he's getting at is the pole. The polarity is offset in the hexagram. One of the reasons is the fact that they're trying to tell you that it's a symmetry of, you know, the 3 points and the 3 points, you know, I mean, standing on top of each other, however you want to look at it. But when you look at it in another perspective, that you really have an 8-pointed octagon that has had a pull of one of its sides, you know, I mean, that it's closing in. You can see, now you're talking about the energy, you can see the pinch in the energy would be offset, because the hexagram, the septagram, the pentagram are all 3 planes or greater illusionary points of interest. So they aren't all on one plane. They don't exist on one plane. They won't exist on one plane. They're tied in through multiple planes, but yet they're portrayed through pernicious design that they are on one plane. And there is where you come up with the, like you said, how do we get back to the symmetry and the conscious revolution that's going on? We expose, just by what we're doing here, that what they're selling us as a bill of goods isn't really the bill of goods. That the hexagonal that they're trying to say, the Star of David, really isn't this beautiful harmonic. It's a disruption, diversion, inversion of an 8-point quadrillation of sound variations. So you have 4, 4, and 4, really, 2 plates holding a spinning axis of 1 in the middle. There's your Zeitgate right there, and we're caught in the middle of it. So that's all I'm trying to say is, you know, what he's getting at is how do we get rid of that dissonance? We expose it and we change the frequencies. Like right now, 440 hold keeps that hexagonal dissonance. So we need to come out of that. We need to ramp it up to a 444, and that'll bring us back into, we can rubber back into a 432 if we want. But I'm seeing that we're moving into an exalted state of C. And the only place that the center C holds true is when 528 is in the is a whole number. When C is a whole number, it's not stretched as a the C era is the same as the House of Horus, is the same as the House of Egypt, as I talk about. We can run circles with this all day long because the whole universe is twisting and turning, and we're in a 45 undulation right now and an inversion between 2 points, and the uprightedness is a half point. That's why we're coming in. That's why the half point wants to take over. So we're moving into the full half cycle right now. We're not completed, but it's a half cycle, which lets me know that we have at least more than one cycle before us. I can't tell you how many there are, but that's just what I wanted to say about that dissonance. You know, we should be in an 8-point triangle or a quadrillation instead of 6-pointed hexagonal. And when it changes, the honeycombs is what I predict. The honeycombs will even go back to being octagonal, just like the old petrified forests and some of the mesas and stuff like that that are petrified in octagonal formations of resins instead of hexagonal. There's 2 different versions of them. One's octagonal, one's hexagonal. So
well, it could have just been. It could have been when we were under the influence of Saturn, when we were under the influence of Jupiter.
Yes, very, very true. No, it is. Yes, we had a green light. The Saturn is actually, there's parts in there. And David Icke brings some of this stuff up, you know, and even a broken clock is right twice a day. So I like some of his work. But yeah, Saturn used to be revered as a sun. So, and it had green light. There was all kinds of evidences that we had green hues of light. And I know from being a horticulturist that growing plants under green light spectrums will literally 2 to 3 times generate their productivity. They'll increase in size and their yield at least 2 to 3 times, if not greater, because you yielded them under a green light, a healing light.
Buddy, when you were talking about charge, I meant to bring up that we, in the models, we always draw them with this kind of symmetry, you know, like in a capacitor, all these pluses on one side and all these negatives on the other. But in actual practice, there's nothing that we've seen in a AC circuit that indicates that that's what, you know, really is actually happening. It's more of a sloshing and an asymmetry of tendency. And a good case and example is something called a titration curve in blood. And if you look carefully at a titration curve, it has different slopes in and out. And in the middle is where we like to, you know, keep our blood so that we survive.
because if we go up the curve or down the curve, then we head to basically a crash. It's sort of like if you have too much calcium or too little calcium, you're going to die. If you have too much blood sugar or too little blood sugar, you're going to die. Salt, same thing. So all of these things have
if you
to
have too much charge, if you're too symmetric, you can't survive.
Right. That seems to be the indication.
We're the break in the symmetry.
Yeah. And think of all the old societies that would build with asymmetric stones, and how they would build those walls, and they would last longer than the Incan ones, because earthquakes would come along and destroy those ones. But the ones that were asymmetric and put together are still, they're now finding them underneath the Great Pyramids, and in Egypt they're finding these asymmetric stones that have been stitched together, and there's some brilliancy that guided ancient people who lived more feng shui to build in an asymmetric manner. And I'm wondering if the plasma scripts, when we look at them, I've never seen a great man plasma script that's actually symmetric. But when the Thunderbolts, like when they make their CGs and stuff, we always make them symmetric. And I think that's an obsession of our modern culture. But in the ancient cultures, there doesn't seem to be that kind of belief.
Here. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, there's a symmetry to the unfolding of the egg. There's a symmetry to the cellular.
Yeah, there is, but it's never actually. I mean, it's not exactly like a
right.
Like you see
like
the mitosis.
Yeah,
right, one is more dominant, and in the cosmic egg, I can tell you, is definitely not symmetric. There is one side's larger than the other. There's a lot of features to that cosmic egg shape in the motif that survives around the world. And if this was one star that broke into two, it doesn't appear that they were equal in mass and size either. And but there's a belief that we've got to make everything symmetric and even and balanced. But maybe the Asiatic sciences are right that our concept of balance is broken, and our it's an Aristotelian problem. You know,
well, their idea.
He's easy to beat up, by the way, Aristotle. So it is his fault, but he was right about a couple of things.
Their idea of balance is
it's a process. Balance is a process. You know, homeostasis is a more of a generalized condition than an actual state.
Well, if we look at balance in the array of colors and the spectrums of light and the interchange, balance in colors doesn't necessarily mean there's got to be exactly, so much orange on one side and so much orange on the other side, or up and down. You just need warmth and cold. You know what I'm saying? There just has to be a balance there, and it could be anybody's perspective of balance, and it always comes out in the phi ratio. And in my work, I always have a calm space. I call it a sanctuary in all my work. My work's very busy, but there's always that place where you can go to in my work, like like you've gone through the whole putting or the whole golf course, but now you come up on the you're 6 feet out of the putting hole. You know what I'm saying? And it's mounded up. It's nice and calm right there. You know what I mean? That's kind of my work is, and that's balance. You can't have a bunch of chaos without a focal point. And the same thing that you said with the blood, turbulence. If you come into a bank, you can look at a NASCAR track where the track might be perfectly ovular, but the cars don't hit it that way. They come in hard on the inside. You know what I mean? Why? Because that's what I was told.
These images that were being pulled up in our biology diagrams always show this symmetry. Of course, they're also showing fake colors that aren't realistic either. But when we actually look at the microscope, we don't see it that way. It doesn't actually, they rarely look like X and Y chromosomes. They usually look like like twisted and curved. And I think that we're obsessed with the ideal and it's
we're obsessed with uniformity, conformity, and symbolism.
And it's coming out in how we're designing the internet. And of course, the internet is one of the greatest forces in our lives currently. So I feel like it might be a problem that we're
creating an ideal. It's sort of like the effect of magazines on young minds as to what body image should be. And the internet is kind of like a little bit our force. There's all sorts of evolving natural biology happening on the internet, but there's all these structures that we're creating to create it in a perfect way, in a perfect symmetric way of living. And nature just keeps hitting us in the head with nonlinear dynamics. It just keeps, whacking.
There's no straight lines in nature. And that's one of the things I kept trying to tell people that are flat earthers. For one, you could fart at the bottom of the ocean and watch a bubble go to the top. It never becomes a pancake. And it never becomes a piece of paper or, disperses in a lateral motion. It always goes in elliptical, spherical motion. If you drop shot in from, you're making shot for your shotgun, you drop shot through a screen, whether it's copper, lead, base, whatever, it doesn't matter what your medium of metal is, but you got molten metal dropped through a certain size screen. There's an actual physics and a geometry to when that will meet through 7 different octaves and meet at a perfect sphere when it drops into the oil. It has to be oil because you can't cool at a certain rate or you fractalize the shot before it, makes itself whole. So, these are dynamics that we have to follow. And since that's true, then everything should be, there's I don't know when the heck I got it from. Maybe I just stumbled onto it. It was an old guy who cultivated 400 acres and he let the land tell him how to do it. And there's not like much of a straight line in any of it, and that's, I think, where we're coming into that.
Is it the guy in Texas who used to be, he created a franchise? Are you talking about that guy?
Old dude, him and his wife built pretty much everything on the property. They created he grows trees and stuff now. I think I could probably bring it up, for everybody to have for this episode even.
Yeah, there's a guy who was a former franchisor, and he bought this terrible piece of land in Texas and totally permaculture restored it. Now it has flowing creeks and flocks of birds, and it's in the middle of like the worst part of Texas. And,
that's in a mountainscape, like maybe Wyoming or something.
Yeah, there's a few.
I'm familiar with that, man. Yeah, it's an emerging idea that actually in India there's a whole movement that's been supported by the government actually, and it's been amazing that they've turned basically arid and unfarmable land and restored the water table by creating by working the lay of the land, the geology of
the land. It's called holistic grazing. If anybody wants to look it up,
there's a couple. It's been an enormous success, and it's been
biblical.
They're doing
now
amazing.
Good.
They're doing it also
it has bigger healing properties as well because it's healed the communities, it's healed factions within the communities, and it's reestablished the meaningful relationship community with government that is productive and makes politicians look good and restores the viability and the livability of the land. So again, that's a complete cycle, isn't it, that we've created?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's biblical. I'd like to interject this in right now because this is absolutely amazing that we're on this subject. Holistic grazing is absolutely biblical, and I'll report it in this. 40 years, the Hebrews holistically grazed the desert. And when they finally got done in the 40 years that they went through the desert and they're did the aeration, the crapping of the land, the animals on the land, the aerating of it, the tears, I mean, you name it, they went around in circles for 40 years. They created their own paradise. So when they finally cultivated in Jerusalem, they really went over the same kind of land that they like forsaken when they were earlier 40 years. And that's what the Lord was saying. You can't see it, so here you go. So they moved them all around. And that's where the one guy in Africa on the Tigris, Euphrates, I think it is, he does all kinds of holistic grazing, and he's amazing. That's why I learned a lot of my stuff at, and he's a little old dude. And that's what he's taught people. One side of the river, they don't holistic graze. It's dead, barren, overrun, you know what I mean? Arid.
Talking about Jeffrey Lawton?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, another old guy, silver-haired fella.
Yeah, the greening the desert stuff is really impressive work, and it's certainly closer to that ideal. Yeah,
that's how the Promised Land was created, and nobody's thinking about that. Nobody understands that manna from heaven is how they created the autoatomic gold that made what? The calf that Moses was so pissed about. That's why, see, people think it was preposterous that he ground it up and fed it to him. Well, that's what he was making a statement of. You ground up, you know, a year's worth of food. There you go. You can eat it now. See, I mean, there's a lot of little tiny things that are missed in biblical historical texts. You have to, some of them you have to go to the conifers. You have to go to Babylonian texts. You know, that's why I'm saying you can't miss any single person's culture around the world, because every single one of them give you a little tiny piece that you're missing from another one. And that's what I found out. And I'm all inclusive. You know, everybody's incomplete. I'm incomplete. That's why I pause and say, hey, take the floor, because somebody can fill in some gaps.
Brighton, before we lose you again, I don't know what happened. I did want to say that I was impressed by your work. I didn't get a chance to say it before. The cube and the
I appreciate that.
I don't know what you called it in the middle. I don't know what the proper name for it was, but
Spiral temples. It's work between me and Mikey Bergman.
Okay.
Do you know Mikey?
Looked good. Looked really good.
Thank you. Yeah, Mikey's been working with Dan Winter for some time on these spiral temples and the relation to the dodecahedron, or dodecahedral implosions and implosions in relation to heart rhythm and genetic strands in DNA composition. There's some fascinating stuff there.
For sure.
You know, Michael said something really deep earlier, which we didn't go further into, but he mentioned that nature uses implosion a lot rather than explosion. And setting aside chemical reaction explosions, there's a lot of truth to what he's saying as far as how things go from high concentration down to low concentration. And it reminds me of when I experienced this. It was like getting high, but I crossed the ley line down at the Knobs, which, if you guys remember, is the huge Lichtenberg formation here in Kentucky. And when I went past it, basically, there was this intuition, and I was basically high while I was driving suddenly, that we were doing electricity wrong, that we were pushing it rather than letting it pull forward itself. And they're probably related subjects, but how to explore that, I don't have a clue. Like how to create an implosion AC generator that could interface with our current grid so that we could slowly move away from that. I don't know. So maybe if anybody wants to take that and run with it.
I already have one in the works. It literally, that's what it is. It's an implosion resonation device, and it runs off. I started out at 1.5 and didn't do it. When I added phi ratio back in the 90s, I started understanding exponential growth. Does that make sense? At 1.5, it didn't make sense, but it's like I knew it was 1.5, but it wasn't quite 1.5. As I honed in everything, 618. I actually had a single cylinder fire up. Almost took my head off. If I wouldn't have had to pull so hard on it to get it to fire over, my cheek would have been right where it launched through tore out the strapping, tore my epoxies out of place, and went and took a chunk out of my welding shop ceiling, and then took another quarter-size chunk out of my floor. And I'm not kidding. I don't.
So where is it? I mean, what'd you do with it?
Well, it was kind of confiscated in a separation of partnerships, but I have the information. Does that make sense? I knew when I went in there that somehow or another, I didn't think that the main partner was going to be the one to do it, but he had a notorious track record of basically, it was down at the 6th floor studios in Detroit. Buddy knows where it's at down in Detroit. If anybody's familiar with the metro area, but basically he would get people in there, he'd get you in there, and then he'd find a reason to argue with you, and then throw you out and keep all your stuff, no matter what kind of tools you had, So anyway, I got this thing running, but the thing is that I realized the problem wasn't getting this machine running, fellas. It was harnessing it and controlling it, because once you start this thing, remember, an object of motion is going to remain in motion. This thing went to exponential growth within 12 revolutions. I'm not kidding.
couldn't.
Right.
It had access to so much current and power, ether or whatever you want to say, that you couldn't harness all of it, and so it would actually. It would
it blew my
it rattled it. It basically caused a resonation destruction, just like the bridge,
I
that
couldn't
famous bridge.
contain it.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. I had to rethink the wheel. I don't know if I verbally said it or if I just thought it so loud that I'm not sure if I said it, but it went through my mind, oh my God, I got to rethink the wheel here. It's so easy to do hyperspace.
Well,
It's actually hyperdrive. There's no such thing as hyperspace. It's only hyperdrive. To distinguish hyperspace, I would say there's hyperfrequency. Does that make sense? You know, to get the hyperdrive to that frequency, then you can cruise in hyperspace. So.
Back to your generator for a second. So I was watching a lathe weight video just the other day. You guys remember he did that, the 1970s, he did that experiment I showed you. There was another video, and he was talking about how they were redesigning the motors and their different scales and over the 100 years, how it changed. And then he showed that they had trouble originally creating the high-speed trains, but by changing the geometry and the configuration, they went from this very unstable system to now they had basically a piece of metal that would float all on its own without its own internal generator.
Rail system, rail technology, yeah.
Yes, but the point being that there was a way to configure the magnetic geometry to create a stable, self-containing. Instead of putting the generator on an axis, maybe the issue is it needs to float surrounded by a magnetic field geometry.
If you want me to finish, right, that was the first version, which is basically a combustible conversion kit, turning a combustible engine into a magnetic resonance device. That's all I did. I took a weed whipper and I turned it into a flat disc, flat rare earth magnetic cell. You know what I mean? I had just it was basically, by the closer you put down the head, the more implosion you got. You know what I mean? The more resistance you got. So electric, in the end, it would be definitely where the crank, it was non-touching parts. There'd be nothing touching because it would be field electricity that it is. And to go along your point of how do you stabilize it in harmonics, I thought it was a 6-point resonance, but it has to be an 8-point harmonic. You literally need to account for every single corner turn. A 6-point doesn't quite do it. What you would do in a 6-point, you'll need a Faraday cage. Follow? In a 6-point harmonic, you're incomplete. You don't quite cause the energy to bring upon itself again. You cause it to explode into the atmosphere. But with 8 points, a V8 rather, you actually cause a harmonic that would, the sound resonance and everything could be monitored, so you could almost dial it in as if you were dialing in like to Harley Davidson or your favorite song. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture how you were designing this original device. You said that you kept the design, even though you don't have the original device?
Yeah, I have the designs and everything. I could draw it out at any given time for you. The sequencer, look at aluminum block. If you look at it, and my goal is, my application mindset is always there. How do we make this applicable? This is great. We can all talk this in a room. You know what I mean? But,
my point is that these guys are doing 3D modeling, and you're talking geometry. You need to hook Buddy and Brighton up with the core of your design, and then I know a guy who has fabrication. And he has a engineering style CAD designing 3D modeling, so it can be taken to the next level.
That's exactly why I'm here. Thank you for
we also have access to the lab out in Idaho.
Right, Garrett Hill.
Yeah, Garrett Hill. So he's been.
These things that I'm talking about right now are going to be things in 10 to 20 years that little kids are going to be learning in 3rd and 4th year olds, or 3 and 4 year olds. 5-year-olds are playing with magnets and stuff. The real thing of it is actually doing all this without the moving components. When you can take and by triangulating or quadrulating a sound series through octave exchanges and you can synergy them, to make one centered point, and basically smack it like a racket, like a tether ball. You know what I mean? And if you can create energy before it disperses, you create a step hold for the next layer of energy. And that's pretty much what my design creates.
My point would be that taking it from there to the public, we're going to need to use decentralized websites, because then you can distribute the information and get it mirrored before it can be taken. Because if you try to use the patent process, I personally know a man who designed
the patent process. Why I don't have it, sir?
I know. Well, but I just want to share, like, I know a man who built a device, not exactly like that one, but built one, and the FBI came and took it, and it turned out, because when they applied for the patent, they let them know that they had built the device, and the FBI had confiscated 28 of these, and that was back in the 80s. Yeah. So we have to put it into a decentralized blockchain space so that it can't be stolen.
Now, what's your name, sir?
Ramon.
Ramon. Oh, excellent, man! I know the voice. I'm like, I know it. You know what I mean? Okay. Thank you, Ramon, for everything you do, man. I love all your work. You're absolutely right. Now, you guys put me onto that cup magnet thing. Now, that cup magnet is basically like the hemispherical head. The combustible hemi head. See, we have to do that. Now, this motor design, we can actually, like I said, it can start out in the elementary design where we could just take over combustible motors and use the short block of it and change over the heads. All you have to do is mill out some of the components inside of it, and you can still have a compressor and a vacuum device using your motor. We can still keep the valves and everything going with the right process. But the thing is that we don't want to make it exclusive. My thing was I know we're going to cut some throats here. You know what I mean? There's going to be a lot of oil people that are going to be out, but why not just have their oil?
Decentralized website and you put the designs out there, and then anybody with
that's what I want.
In the new cloud, we're gonna create machining as a service, and I've seen it done before, machining as a service, but we're gonna take it to the next level, because you'll be able. So I haven't told any of you guys about Resilient Firm, and I will at some point, but
very exciting stuff.
The goal of machining as a service would be that we would be capable of having it manufactured in a location where the system does not have control. And by keeping it in a decentralized blockchain website, they won't be able to attack it, and then we just mirror it, even if they manage to find a way to hack one. It would be...
You're answering my prayers, because that was it. When I started realizing, and I mean, there's hundreds of us, with these other people, one guy in particular that disappeared, and they took a shit, you know what I mean? And I was like, wow. And I already knew I got enough in me, I could be a patent lawyer, but they told me once I did all the patent work and passed all their tests that now I need to do the actual 8 years of being a regular lawyer, because I need to know what's, breaking the law, not breaking the law. And I told them to take a flying, you know what I mean? But when I found all that out, it's a thievery. They're taking from the people that can get to the place before all the conscious is at.
Right.
As they know.
So if everybody is interested in, if everybody's interested in decentralized websites, there is an extension called the Unstoppable extension. You can download it in the Chrome store, and it enables you to actually get onto any decentralized website, which has an encrypted, address. And they already are moving against it. I was sharing the Unstoppable extension on LinkedIn, and the article about the Unstoppable extension, and there's an article on like Gizmodo or something, and the LinkedIn algorithm was removing it because they're afraid of decentralized websites. They're afraid of the power of blockchain.
Now, do you know they also have, there's two guys from, I think it's Norway or Iceland, one of the two. I think it's Iceland. I'm starting to incline more to Iceland from my remembering. Anyway, they created an device that you become your own. So no matter where you're at, you know what I mean? You can get on the net. You can do whatever you want to do, wherever you want to do it. You just plug and you're good to go. And they literally stifled them to the point that they're ostracized from even being able to buy parts for their components. Like that's how on board, like you're saying this is
we'll create the electric universe version of this repository
and we'll make it in a way they don't know exactly who's doing it. So that
I share everything here with you guys because, once I start sharing it, the odds of me making it are slim and none. The only thing that's going to keep me alive is the ever-loving that sends me. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. But I want to share this stuff with minds that can actually move forward with it if something were to happen.
I'll learn how to create a decentralized website and how the mechanics of that works. But everybody, if you want to be able to access decentralized blockchain websites now, just install that Unstoppable extension or look it up, the article, and read about it. And it's the wave of the future for free speech, and to get these kinds of technologies and knowledge out there to where it can't be attacked. That's the direction that we got to go.
That's where I'm
Excellent
at.
information. I couldn't agree more. I think blockchain is an amazing potential for humanity, and really a powerful sort of it's a consensus making and decentralized, but communal sharing of ideas. And these concepts are dear to my heart. But the idea that those things are not limiting, but they're freeing, and that the universality means that it can't be crushed by a small individual force. That's all exciting stuff. It's all exciting stuff, and applied in, and we've only applied the concept of blockchain technology in limited ways. There are so many other things that we can apply this technology to, and I think you really have your finger on the pulse of the future there.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's absolutely going to be necessary for future emails and everything, because with quantum supremacy, there's no way to create privacy except through increasing the blockchain and being able to get past the speed of the quantum computers. Of course, they're not quite there yet, but they're trying. So
They said they did, didn't they? They came out.
They did, but but the scientists have also come out and said that there were problems with it. So, I mean, it's a semi quantum computer, so it's not exactly the real deal. But at the same time, in order to deal with that, we're going to have to create blockchains that are so long that it takes, centuries to unravel for even quantum computers. And right now, I mean, I guess the goal is just.
Sorry, do you know the origin of blockchain?
I've heard a lot of different things. I haven't personally looked into every little origin, but I've heard a lot of different theories about it. And the only thing I remember is that it started off as a school project, is what I had heard. But I learned that back when Bitcoin first came out in 2008, and I could be wrong.
I'll tell you what. No matter what, it involved IBM.
Yeah, probably. Schools, all the schools are in bed with big companies. Every one of them. Here, the University of Kentucky is in bed with Toyota and the NSA. So it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Well, look at Robert Young that tried to. He had a whole entire collective of medical research that changed. John Hodgkin's curriculum for teaching. It's books, everything. And then all of a sudden, Big Pharma came in and said, you got to pull all his books or we're defunding you. And within a moment, Dr. Robert O. Young was, ostracized and kind of like leading a whole new life.
And
I just remembered that there is a new movement in DNA. And there's a site. I'll post it. I have to get to a computer to do it. There's a group of people who are altering genes, and then they take the genes and they put them into viruses, and then they try and cure. So there's a guy on his YouTube channel
with CRISPR.
He had created. Yeah, he used a CRISPR and he created a lactose, a lactose intolerance curing pill. And he cured himself of lactose intolerance for 1.5 years with this virus that he had made. And he has a whole GitHub where they're sharing it. And that might be a direction that we could consider for sharing scientific information to keep it away from the peer review monster.
Yeah, as soon as we can start getting to more, as like what Buddy's doing with the sonobiology, which I do bioharmonics, biolinguistics. as soon as we can start getting to the fact that the sound came first, actually the conscious vibration came before the sound even, because the tones before the sounds are what changes everything. There's where the real movement's at. That's how I've been healing myself within, literally disseminating the destruction that's happened in a winged shoulder, finding the field harmonics in my own body, the bioharmonics of all the different energy points. So once we start getting to the point that we understand that pressure, this a speaker pressure, they got they use them for weapons. So, everything's, gets weaponized. And that's another thing that, I haven't let out my information for, because I don't want it weaponized. And if I do, I want people to understand they already can unweaponize it. You know what I mean? So if what you're saying, Ramon, is true, I would love that, because I think this is how I've always been wanting to do it, is one strike, like just get it all out there. Nobody's got to kill me for it, because everybody in the world's got it now. You know what I mean? And now everybody can start. I'd like to make it so simplistic and elementary that people are now starting to pull apart their old magnets, going to the junkyard. You know what I mean? Finding old speaker magnets.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Learning how to wrap their own electromagnetic field coils, how to make their own sequentiator series engines, magnetic resonant implosion devices. All you need is an aluminum block that has the new technologies for the coil packs and stuff, because you have a sequentiator that's your crank sensor. That's all you need. And everything else you can actually dial in a potentiometer and or a rheostat switch, and you can run your own device just like that. I mean, this is how simple it is, that little kids should be doing this 10 to 20 years from now as classroom experiments, like the old plastic models we used to put together that actually you turn the crank and it made the motor run, right?
Yeah.
That's what this is. That's how silly, stupid it is that we are this far behind from it. How can some muck like me figure it all out?
I just wanted, I couldn't help it. On the right there, the diagram above looks like a C-hinge mound. I just couldn't help it. Who's driving? Is that Buddy driving?
Right. Who's driving?
It looks like a C-hinge mound. I just couldn't. It's like it blew me away there. I'm sorry, I got distracted.
The reason I looked this up is because last episode we went into Lagrangian points, and Lagrangian points are places where they're pinches in the plasma. Like if you want to get a bad entity away, or if you want to get an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend away from your aura, you have to have closure. Everything involves opening and closure. If you don't want closure, then it's an open gate still, and you have to create closure. So closure is attained by getting rid of and extinguishing what was once before. I mean, not like the thing, getting the mind field of it, the plasma attachment, the pinch points are the Lagrangian. This is when your mind becomes resolute, when you make a decision and it pinches you off from where you once were. Or there's another point here where you make a decision, and I like to, like I say, all of what I talk about is interdisciplinary. So it's very psychological, it's very biological, but also astrophysical. I mean, you can take all of these points and put them together and realize that when you have to break off an ex-girlfriend, you really have to, pinch point and get rid of that, and it involves moving on.
Yeah. Hey, I have a story like that. It's not a girlfriend.
Don't we all?
My wife and I had a business partner, and she's a good person. I don't want to portray the wrong idea there, but to bring her business up to heights, I put a lot of effort in, and I entangled my energy into that clinic, and we were the majority owners. But once she started to get like full of juice from the Blue Lotus tree, she started to feel kind of like independent and saw it as only hers, and it was a real problem of vision. So I created a whole plan for, like, you know, when she chose to leave the company, to sever. And wouldn't you know, I mean, it was like uncanny. Every time there was a problem in the company, we would go and search and scour through all sorts of means, and we would find some way in which there was still an entanglement. And sometimes it would be like the credit card machine company was still letting her see, you know, the records or something like that. There would always be this entanglement that hadn't been cut. And then so for a long time, we didn't, you know, we thought we'd cut every rope, and there was some problem happening, and it was a few months ago. And then just out of nowhere, we got a bill from the city that her clinic is in, and it was like, we haven't been entangled with that business in so long. And it was like there was some function in the universe trying to keep the two together, and it almost could make you ill, like if you didn't handle it in a quick enough manner. And I know it's very abstract, but it speaks to what you're talking about, the importance of that closure. And I've had patients, female patients usually, who make the mistake of, they answer one more text and it gets worse, like the situation gets worse. Yeah. Instead of obeying the breakup, and then the guy goes uber control, like they thought he was bad before, but now he's like dangerous. And I'm like, oh, if only they understood you can't even answer one text. Just even one could create this, like, I don't know if you want to call it feedback or snap. I call it snapback usually.
Yeah. Yep. It's definitely vestigial fluid. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, dude, you start dealing with these energies and these higher forms, these plasmatic types of goo, like we said, juju, ether, angels, spirit world. It's 98% space out there, 99.99% space. And then they say plasma is 99% of the universe. So what is the universe? It's mostly plasma. It's plasma transitioning from one form into another using implosion right before our eyes. That's why we need to get the fuck out in nature and enjoy that shit and get your eyes inside of it so you can envelop in the womb and the ovium of the geometry of the grand geometer, or whatever you want to call the great architect, God, source, logos. It's time that we bask in this.
Let's go with creator because it looks good on paper.
It's creating. We're always a new being. Every show, I'm a totally different person. I don't know if you noticed that yet, but I morph. I'm a completely different person from moment to moment. And people see me and they don't recognize me. And then they're like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? It's just because I put a different hat on or a different outfit. You know, your attire and the outer apparel that you wear really is what transitions you and changes you into a different person. Sorry, your look. Nikola Tesla said that if you want to be something, look like that thing, you know, become that thing. And that's the organism that it is. You know, if you want to start to take play in any of your desires as you move towards becoming an always transitioning being, transitional masterpiece, you can master things. You can master multiple things constantly at the same time. We are not confounded. We are not overwhelmed. There's so much information out there, and it's beautiful. And we need to look at things with different view, a different eye, a different optic. It's about how you present the information and how other people see the information that's being presented, that either allows the thing to bloom into a head or allows it to wither into a tail and be the end of the
Can I speak to like support you? Do you mind? So, before I knew that all of this was called alchemy, I've always been like ridiculously into all these different things. And people frequently ask me, like, how do you find the time to do all this stuff?
Mhm.
And I would just tell them, like, I make the time. I don't know what else to say. I make the time. And
Right.
of course, most people that use that as an expression, but I mean it pretty literally. And I don't know how to actually convey that it's done. I know that it made a difference when I listened to Earl Nightingale say that you don't manage time, you manage activities. That made a huge difference. But I don't know what to say. It's just like people, they believe that they don't have enough time to do X, Y, Z. When they say that, I just think, oh, what a limiting idea. Like they're saying, they're advertising to themselves that they're failing, and that vibration is being set in them before they've even started.
Yep.
And
Where are the discoverers of our fucking past 40, 80, 60 years generations? There's no discoverers. Where's the fucking person holding the torch? Discovering new land. What is it? Space colonization? Space? Is it Elon Musk? I mean, come on. Like, there's a lot of shit going on out there, and we are in the exponential. Let's grab it. Let's take the future and give it to ourselves so as to regurgitate it so that the future can actually eat it. Like, we have to become a bird so that we can vomit this shit up so it can become digested again, so we can finally recursively understand our braid, our quaternion braid to the sun. And you go out there and you look directly in the sun as it sets, right before it sets, and you tell me there is not an alternating current inside of the sun. And that is what gave fucking Nikola Tesla the inspiration, because he was taught to sun gaze and he's seen it, and you can see it for yourself. Go out, venture, don't be afraid, go out into nature.
In the spirit of what Raymond just said, I'd like to add that as a child, I myself was I had a really hard. I'm an only child, and I learned how to entertain myself. I learned how to enjoy myself, but I struggled with my ability to understand why other people my own age were acting the way they were. I couldn't relate to people my own age for a long time, and that had to do with being an only child. Partly, but it had to do with how I adapted to being an only child, and ergo the way I think as an adult. And I think at the end of the day, I think we all have that process. We all come to that process. I tried in my early 20s and late teens and even early 30s to be well-rounded and to be sort of like, jack of all trades, like not too much this, not too much that, because as a child, I was such an extremely different kid. I thought different, I said different things, I would say shit just like I do now that weirds people out, And so I tried to hide that for a long, 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 long time, and it's only now in my
We wouldn't know.
Yeah, thank you. And in my mid-50s, I am only now coming back to that authenticity of not being a generalist, but being a specific. And I think, Raymond, the way that you learn is there's a lot of shit that you don't do. Right? You focus your energy, you focus your time, and you're intentional about it. And I think that makes us special and unique in our own way, in a way that I'm now embracing as well. But I didn't used to. I used to try to be a generalist, and I think that kept me from achieving sort of the heights of awareness that I have now, that I've become willing to see myself as a total and complete, anomaly or freak or whatever, and embracing that has helped me to sort of be more self-actualized, I guess is the word they use. And I think that's the mechanism by which we all get to the place that we are, is just by, there's just a lot of stuff that I don't play a lot of video games, I guess, for example. Maybe other people do.
Hey, Michael?
Yeah.
Would you mind if I added a word on that right now? On what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, no, yeah. I would not mind.
Okay, excellent. I don't want to steal the floor, but, at this point in time, I want to share with everybody here a really cool experience. I'm always called the little stubborn mule, when I talk with you after loving, creator. We'll just call him the creator because we the people. The creator gave us endowed rights, so we'll go with that. So the creator and I hanging out and everything, and he calls me his little stubborn mule. I translated to jackass. I mean, that's my own translation. But after history, the very first night, I left the house because there was contention in there, and I could tell from the wife and all, and the dog, feeding off her energy. I went out to the barn, and about 4 in the morning, I get up, and I went from being called the little stubborn mule to get up, little unicorn. We have much work to do, and I thought, unicorn. Honestly, I'll tell you right now, man. I was like, I was thinking like, why you gotta, make this some pink foo-foo thing for little kids? What's going on? I'm not a little unicorn. You know what I mean? And he says, think on what I say and respond. Well, let's break down the word unicorn. And this is why I bring this up, Michael, because you're very unique. Okay. And you're very unique. We're all here are very unique people. We got some beautiful, unique perspectives. And if you look at the word unicorn,
my uniqueness in the context of the general uniqueness of the group, and that's very reassuring to me. So I really appreciate that.
You. And I want to drive it home on top of that to really, my last name, my surname, my birthright name is the name of Horn, which happens to carry the E at the end. And a very cool gentleman, another researcher that I know from years back now, he's disappeared for a bit, but anyway, I played from all the time. He informed me about the fact that E is on the last of my name. That means truth. It's the horn of truth. It means it bears truth. So therefore, and he explained my name in Hebrew, not king who bears truth. And the reason why I say that is because look at the word unicorn. Now, for you to spell it just a little differently and put unique horn, see what I mean? That's what mine was. He was saying, get up, my little unique truth. We have much work to do. So that's what I'm saying to you. You're your own unique truth. And without you, your story is void. See what I mean? And we a lot of us miss that. And without me, my story is void. And my unique truth, and I'm very unique. I've just very blessed to know that for a long time.
It's our credentials, so to speak, really.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's a radio frequency. Like I can't call Mike on the phone and then think I'm going to use that same damn phone number and get a hold of Chris or maybe Buddy, right? That's your unique phone number. Right? That's your identity. That's the way each one of us, our junk DNA is in a certain, that's our antenna. We need to really inform the world that that's not junk, okay? That's just what somebody calls something they can't do nothing with. That is integral DNA, and that is why you are you. And you take from that and you get from that, and that's your antenna. And why you circumvent at a frequency you do, and why you resonate with people that have the same kind of antenna resonation. Whether you're high resonation or low resonation. You know what I mean? And that's was when I really see the healing is going to begin. Non-invasive. We don't need to cut each other open anymore for thinking we're going to heal somebody.
Hey,
I think
buddy,
one of the first times I ever understood what you're saying is, as a teenager in my bedroom playing with the radio, I understood a basic concept about the way the universe works just by my own little AM/FM radio by my bed. That there were stations that you could tune into and get a great sound, and then there was space between the stations which were essentially static, and this is an exemplary of my weirdness. I would listen to the static because I thought maybe I could make sense of the static in the same way that the station itself could be made sense of. I think I was influenced by popular media like the horror films and stuff where there was static on the TV or such. But I'm not suggesting that I was tuning into some cosmic force, but the concept was pressing it within me that I thought there must be maybe there's a message. If I listen long enough, I can hear the static. And, well, that wasn't something that I ever kind of arrived at.
If Robitaille's right, you were tuning into water.
Continues. I'm sorry.
If Robitaille's right, you're tuning into water. So that's actually pretty.
Can I say that I noticed something? I think sex is implosive. Sex is a lot of the time.
Well, it's
from
both.
One.
That was the most awesome giggle I've ever heard, Raymond.
I'm a bit of a perv, just so you know.
No,
so
that's awesome. I honor.
Listen, fellas, I got to go and do things with my wife, but I want to say that at
On
some
that
point
note,
I gotta piggyback off of what Buddy was talking about with a concept called time borrowing from the future, and then also I just wanted to note that we came really close to discussing or entering and just having a little bit of Dharma flavor, and maybe at some point we could talk about world popping in general, because I think it's a subject that people will really key into and resonate with. But I got to run. So I
Tantalizing
time in your space.
Thank you for speaking, Ramon. Love you, brother.
All right, man.
All right.
Bye,
Yeah,
guys.
we're going to wrap it up here pretty soon. So any last regards? It is 4:44 at 6/6/2020. I say let's end it.
let's do it. That's my number, bro. My gematria for my name is actually 444.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I love it, man. Bless you all, man. I love everyone here, and
Thank you,
this
everybody,
is our
for
family.
tolerating me.
And Michael, you're right.
Everyone, have a good week. See you next week.
Peace.
Take care.
Peace.
Thank you for joining us for Season 3, Episode 25. See you next week. Love is watching.
It don't matter whether we're riding or whether we're driving, as long as I'm riding with you. It don't matter whether we're riding or whether we're driving, as long as I'm riding with you. It don't matter whether we're riding or whether we're driving, as long as I'm riding with you. It don't matter whether we're riding or whether we're driving, as long as I'm riding with you. I don't wanna be the person to burden you. Emergency's a first hand, urgency's a second hand. Supplying the man, to find a definitive intervention for man. Not a Da Vinci Code, but a source code. Not a kiss and a toad and it turn into a prince. Not a turtle in a herd, not a fairy tale. Not a narrative, not a nursery rhyme. Not an aeroplane, all I wanna play with is real life intangible truth. Parallel to perfect tearing up my curtain, tearing up my hair again. Nancy Kerrigan, fair skin, hairpins, nails, her tailspin. Sonic speed, honestly, all I need is the good weed and the beer. All you wanna say is that my empathy is empty, and I beat you with a curse word. Verbs her pressure where the wound bleeds. In order to swoon me, a spoon feed. Come by, I killed him with the curfew option. Adoption of property, the bippity boppity boo, the vapor that comes out of you. The people are robbing you of your spirit cause you have none. Pursuing the one with me, and all I do, you need me to do. And I will do all that you see, all that we are, I don't even go, all that we know, all that we read, all that we read, to pursue no envy in me, and I will do what you need me to do, I'll do what you need me to do, I'll do, I'll do. masquerade, as for round, all I am is infinity. All that you can see, all that we are, all that we go to, all that we are rearranged into.
Geometric view is love is watching product, love is watching production. Thank you for doing that. Music is by the acronym Beauty, the acronym BUD, and Abyssal Dionysus is the geometer. That's me and Brighton. Thanks for being here. Catch you next Saturday. Executive producer for the Geometric View is Buddy James Doherty. Thank you, Heather, Michael, Brighton, Tess, Chad, Brian, and everybody else involved. Thank you, Vladimir B. Ginsburg. Thank you, Jim Wenninger.
So having it, I'm no fears, having it, I'm no fears. Like heaven appears, heaven opens. I've got you. I've got you. I've got you. Thank you for your undivided, undivided attention.
I've got you.
First things first. Love, marriage, baby and a baby carriage. Carry us, carry around. Inside together. Oh yeah, playing in the sun all day long till it comes, and all along you knew that it was gonna be the dawn, and then the dark. I never sitting down together all alone at the same time now. I never kill. Each other up for the flow. The flow is keeping us together. One voice, one choice, nothing more, nothing less. Here we go. Flex, flex, flex your flow. Flex, flow, flex your flow. Here we go. Flex, flex your flow. Your flow, flex your flow. Your flow. Let your light shine, let your light shine. Be different in the instant. Find out. Oh, top of the way morning to read. Top of the way morning to know that we do this. Oh, it's people do it, yes. It's a great day. Just when you think you're wreaking havoc upon us, your magic is gone and as if it dissipates in the wind. What you thought you had to plan and now it's debunked. You pulled the wool over the eyes disguising the beast beneath and conveniently peeking through your privates and novelist ominous obvious is a motive of malarkey. Park a car in the dark and embark in your abode. Know your home is where your heart has started the beginning. You're prepared.
No way home, so make your way home. No way home, so make your way home.
Start at the beginning and I'm already sinning again. Am I gonna make it home in the body bag, holding a mind that I'm molding a king of continents, holding up the soul and a one foot in the pool, and I am cool with thinking this plan could really work out.
Melting in a medium and need to re-immerse and arise from a simple mind. Die several times over, be the new beginning who is in us to the end. You know the one I speak about.
Make a switch, the situation's gonna make you afraid.
Make a switch, the situation's gonna make you fade.
Make a switch, the situation's gonna make you afraid.
Make a switch, the situation's gonna make you fade.
Make a switch, the situation's
already faded. Now you flip the switch and each and every inch is light.
Now you're gonna make it home for dinner.
Now that you're gonna make it home for dinner.
Found the way home. Find your way home.
We're gonna make you flip and go berserk. We're gonna make you work until you sweat. We're gonna drink tears until you thirst. We're gonna feel your heart rapid in eternity until the earth turns and turns.
Now if I could tell you what you're doing, you'd be losing if you don't dare to be the difference. Stare into the rise and tell them that you love them. A hug is all that some of us need, but love is what all of us bleed. Jesus Christ is the one that freed him. We can need him, we can drink his blood as a symbol of self-sacrifice. I said it all, there it is, everything. Take the ingredients and bake a cake. cage.
Bound the